Hi there, I'm Fiona. At my sister's wedding, I wasn't a bridesmaid. I wasn't even a guest. I was the parking attendant. Yeah, that was my role. Handing out valet tickets while strangers toasted to a future I wasn't invited to witness. But that wasn't the worst part. What really broke me was realizing they didn't forget me, they erased me. From the photos, from the live stream, from the family itself. And when I finally walked away, what happened next? Well, let's just say they didn't see it coming. Why would a mother hand her daughter a waiver just to silence her? Why would a bride secretly plan a divorce before saying, I do? And what would you do if it was your family? The sun hit my windshield like it had a grudge. I pulled into the gravel loop of the estate, tires crunching under me like brittle bones. Charleston could be beautiful in late spring, magnolias in bloom, the scent of salt in the air, but today it just felt like a setup, like the weather itself was mocking me. I parked off to the side near the back service area. Not the guest lot. No, this was clearly designated for help. The staff vehicles were lined up like obedient soldiers, SUVs, pickups, and a rental van with the catering logo half peeled off. I turned the engine off, stared at the grand colonial building ahead, and took a breath. 2 weeks ago, Clarice, my mother, had called. No greeting, no check-in, just, we're short-handed for the wedding. You're organized. You could manage the parking lot, couldn't you? No mention of me being family, no RSVP, just parking. Still, like a fool, I agreed. Why? I told myself it was about being helpful. But deep down, I hoped, stupidly, that maybe being present meant being seen. The first thing they gave me when I checked in was a lanyard, a laminated name badge clipped to it, bold black letters, Fiona, no last name, no designation, not sister of the bride, just Fiona, like I was part of a catering crew they'd picked up off Craigslist. Black on black, the coordinator said, handing me a staff shirt wrapped in plastic. We're going for cohesive. Clarice's voice echoed in my mind. Brand consistency matters. It's not personal. I slipped into the uniform in the staff restroom. Polyester, tight around the shoulders. It smelled like starch and someone else's perfume. I folded my jumpsuit carefully and tucked it into a plastic garment bag. I didn't feel like myself anymore. I felt like background noise. Guests started arriving just before noon. BMWs and Teslas gleamed in the sun like they were part of the decor. Some of the drivers nodded at me like I wasn't there. One woman actually waved me over, rolled her window down, and chirped, "Is the valet bathroom out back too?" She laughed before I could answer, already rolling up the tinted glass. By the time the fifth luxury SUV pulled in, I stopped trying to smile. Every greeting from a stranger chipped at me, a reminder, you're not one of them. You're service now. I asked the event manager if I should assist inside once traffic slowed. She didn't even look up from her clipboard. No, you're scheduled outdoors only. Don't forget sunscreen. Inside, I knew they were taking photos. Toasts. A string quartet playing Vivaldi. I heard the faint clink of champagne glasses carried by the wind. Meanwhile, I stood in the heat, moving traffic cones with sweaty palms and a growing ache in my lower back. My shoes, ballet flats, never meant for gravel, were already scuffed. The blister forming on my heel was going to burst before the first dance even happened. A silver Lexus pulled in. The passenger window dropped and a familiar face leaned out, Mrs. Kellerman. She used to live down the street from us when I was a kid. She squinted. Fiona? Oh, I didn't realize you were working the wedding? Her words hung in the air like damp laundry. I lied gently. Just helping out. Family pitch-in. She smiled politely, the way people do when they don't know what to say, but definitely feel sorry for you. When the stream of cars slowed, I found a small patch of shade behind a pillar. I let my weight sink against it, pretending to check my phone. I wasn't expecting messages, but I still hoped. A message blinked on screen. Mason, still want me to show up? I stared at it. I hadn't told him how bad this was. He'd offered to fly in, just to support me. I said no. Said it wasn't worth the hassle. Now I wasn't so sure. I didn't answer. I just looked at the grand entrance in the distance. Music swelled from inside. Laughter, toasts, cheers. None of them were for me. And then, from the corner of my eye, I saw movement. Someone stepping out of the main hall. Not a guest. Not staff either. A camera hung from his neck. The videographer. He wasn't filming the party anymore. He was filming me. I didn't move, didn't flinch. Just stood there, frozen, pretending the camera hadn't found me. The videographer had stepped out for candids, or so I assumed. He swung his camera casually like a bored tourist, catching clips of Delphine swirling in slow motion with guests on the lawn. Her veil danced like a ribbon. Her friends laughed at just the right volume. The lighting was golden, filtered, perfect. Then his lens shifted slightly, toward me. Out of habit, I offered a polite smile. Not wide, just enough. He paused, squinting at the viewfinder, then awkwardly lowered the camera. Sorry, he said, not quite meeting my eyes. Bride asked that we avoid filming the support team. Support team, that's what I was now? Not sister, not family, just support. I nodded once. No problem. He turned and wandered back toward the entrance, shoulders tight like he knew he'd crossed a line. I didn't blame him. He was just following a list. Everyone today was following some list, but that list didn't have my name on it. I took my phone out again and opened Instagram. There was a new carousel post on the wedding page, sunlight through champagne glasses, handwritten vows, Clarice laughing with Russell during the rehearsal dinner. I tried tagging Delphine in a comment. The screen flashed, user not found. I blinked. That couldn't be right. I tapped on her profile. Blank, vanished. No grid, no bio, blocked. I didn't even realize I was holding my breath until the tightness in my chest pushed it out. Curious now, I checked the hashtag. #Delphine and Malcolm say I do. Hundreds of posts, clips, stories. None of them had me in a single frame, not even in the background. I moved to Facebook. Clarissa's profile was public, intentionally so, I was sure. Her feed was a shrine to Delphine. Toasts, centerpieces, family photos carefully chosen. In one, Russell stood between Delphine and Clarice, both women beaming. The caption read, "The three that built this day together." No mention of me. No likes from me either. I scrolled without touching anything, the way you stare at a storefront knowing you can't afford what's inside. The crunch of gravel made me look up. A voice followed it, low and familiar. "Hey, they said this was the check-in." It was Mason. He was holding a simple boutonniere and an envelope. My envelope. I'd written it 2 weeks ago. Inside was a short note. "Wear this and meet me near the back garden." I had tucked it into a card that said, "Thank you for not letting me disappear." I hadn't expected him to use it, but he had. A security guard blocked his path. "You're not on the app list," he said. "Bride's family cleared names this morning." "I'm here as a guest of Fiona," Mason said, calm but firm. The guard frowned. "We've got no Fiona registered on the guest tier." "I was personally invited," Mason said again. "I'm sorry, if your name isn't in the app or manual list, I can't let you inside." I stepped forward quickly. "It's okay," I said, my voice flat. "He's with me." The guard glanced at me, then shrugged. Mason's eyes searched mine. "You good?" I nodded once. "Yeah, go ahead, I'll text you." "You sure?" "Yeah," I lied. He lingered for a second, but I stepped back before he could say more. I watched him walk back toward his rental car, boutonniere still in hand. No fuss, no questions, just quiet disappointment. When his taillights disappeared down the gravel path, I sat on the edge of the wooden bench near the parking cones. My hands rested in my lap, motionless. The sting wasn't sharp. It was slow, numbing. I wasn't just unwelcome, I was edited out. No space at the table, no face in the feed, no voice in the room. My body was here, but the version of me that belonged to this family? She had been erased a long time ago. Today just confirmed it. I sat in that silence for a long time, watching shadows lengthen across the grass. Guests moved in pairs, sipping rosé, laughing under paper lanterns. I stayed where I was, just beyond the view of the lens. My phone buzzed again. A text from Mason. "They don't deserve you, but I'll wait nearby, just in case." I stared at the words. I didn't reply. A glass shattered somewhere near the patio. A chorus of claps followed. More laughter, more joy that didn't include me. And then a microphone clicked on inside. Clarissa's voice followed. The sound system wasn't perfect, but Clarissa's voice cut through like polished glass. "And now," she said, her tone syrupy and precise, "a toast to the reason we're all here today, I stood a few steps away from the patio doors. I could see the guests raising their glasses, heads tilted with polite expectancy. Delphine has always been our sunshine, Clarice continued. Our golden girl. The one who knew what she wanted even before she could spell it. She lights up every room she walks into. They clinked their flutes and smiled like they'd rehearsed it. I waited. Just one line, one syllable, something. Instead, Clarice added with a playful smirk, Some families get one perfect child. We got lucky. We got Delphine. The laughter was instant, light, carefree, like someone had made a harmless joke about a favorite dessert. But I didn't laugh. I didn't even blink, because it wasn't just a punchline, it was a scalpel. My phone slipped deeper into my back pocket. I crossed my arms and leaned against the stucco column by the patio stairs. A waiter passed without seeing me. A breeze lifted the edge of my staff shirt. Still scratchy, still not mine. That toast didn't hurt because it was surprising. It hurt because it wasn't. 2 weeks earlier, I'd stopped by Clarice's house. A quiet Sunday. I wasn't invited. I just showed up with a small velvet box and a handmade bracelet inside. Nothing extravagant. Just a thoughtful something blue, crafted with stones I knew Delphine liked. Because even when she didn't like me, I still remembered what she loved. Clarice opened the door just enough to see me. Her lips tightened. Delphine stood behind her, arms crossed, eyes already rolling. Mom, I said. I just wanted to wish her well. Clarice didn't open the door wider. Didn't invite me in. She didn't even glance down at the box in my hands. Instead, she looked over her shoulder at Delphine, then turned back to me and said, You don't get to do this anymore. I'm not trying to cause trouble, I said softly. You're not part of this, she interrupted. Calm, sharp, like she was canceling a subscription. I'm your daughter, I said. I didn't mean for it to come out like that, like a plea. Clarice's expression didn't shift. No, I have one daughter, the one getting married. She didn't whisper it. She didn't flinch. She just closed the door slowly, like she was hanging up a phone. Delphine didn't say a word, but she smiled. And that smile has stayed with me. It's strange, the things that stick. Moments that harden in your chest like stones. Not the big betrayals, but the small confirmations. The ones you knew were coming. I'd buried that moment, tried to rationalize it. She was stressed. Weddings make people weird. Maybe she didn't mean it like that. But now, hearing her toast echo over clinking glasses, her laughter dancing with the crowds, I knew better. This wasn't about stress. This was a pattern. Years ago, when I got my scholarship letter for pre-med, I'd shown it to her with shaking hands. She'd nodded, barely lifting her eyes from the stove, and said, That's nice, dear. When Delphine placed third in a spelling bee, Clarice threw a brunch, had a banner printed. Words matter and so does Delphine. My whole life had been an exercise in shrinking. Less attention, less fuss, less room to ask for more. But today wasn't just another day of being overlooked. Today was the day she told the world I didn't exist. The sky was shifting to amber as the afternoon edged closer to dusk. Guests started drifting toward the buffet, the small talk getting louder with wine. I walked away from the main entrance, trying to stay out of frame, out of reach. I passed a group of women near the garden hedge. One of them, maybe a cousin's plus one, whispered a little too loudly, Wait, is that the bride's sister? A second voice answered, No, I think she's adopted or something. They never talk about her. They didn't even lower their voices. I stopped behind a tree. My fingers curled into fists, not out of rage, but something slower, denser, grief, the kind that doesn't rush out. It settles. The gravel beneath my feet crunched as I turned around and headed back toward the parking lot. I couldn't be seen pacing. Staff wasn't supposed to linger where guests could see them idle. Not that I was truly staff, or family, or anything. I didn't notice the woman at first. She was already halfway across the lot, striding straight toward me in low heels and a silver wrap. Her hair was the color of frost, elegant, pinned back with minimal effort. Her posture made it clear she wasn't here to socialize. She stopped a few feet away. Her voice was low but unmistakably firm. You don't look like someone who belongs in a parking lot. I blinked, unsure if she was joking or scolding me. Then I realized who she was. Malcolm's mother, Vera. And whatever she was about to say, it wasn't small talk. Vera didn't look away. She just held my gaze like she was checking for something. Damage, maybe, or whatever was left underneath it. Then she reached into the pocket of her wrap and pulled out a cold bottle of water. The condensation slipped down her fingers as she extended it toward me. "Take it," she said. "Hydration is survival out here." I took the bottle, more out of surprise than need. The water cooled my hand instantly. I hadn't realized how dry my throat was. "You're her sister?" she asked, voice level but curious. "Yeah," I answered. She raised a single brow, the movement subtle. "Strange. Everyone inside pretends you don't exist." I gave a dry laugh, more breath than sound. "I'm not their pride," I murmured. "I'm the part they don't brag about." Vera didn't flinch. She looked at me the way a doctor might study a bruise, measuring depth, cause, and the likelihood of healing. "They'll regret that," she said softly. For a few seconds, I forgot where we were. The venue, the wedding, the invisible uniform I was sweating through. It was the first time all day someone looked at me without squinting like I was out of place. Vera wasn't offering sympathy. She was offering recognition. I almost didn't hear the footsteps approaching. A woman in crisp flats and a headset appeared, clipboard in hand, smiling like she practiced in a mirror. "Hi, are you Fiona?" she chirped. I turned slowly. "Depends on who's asking." "I'm with the coordination team," she said, glancing briefly at Vera, then back to me. "Clarice asked me to get your signature, just a formality." She handed me the clipboard. A neatly typed sheet sat on top with bolded headers. Volunteer and staff liability waiver, zero media clause. I skimmed the bullet points. No social media posting of any kind, no speaking to guests or press about internal matters, no presence in photo-video documentation, no disruption or interference with scheduled programming. I looked up at her. "Is this normal for parking attendants?" She smiled again. "It's just to prevent confusion. You're not on the guest list, so it's standard practice." Standard practice to silence someone. I turned the page over. Blank, no addendum, no explanation, just a line for my signature. "It's meant to protect the couple," she added quickly. "You know, from any misinterpretation or drama." "This is to keep me quiet," I said flat. She didn't argue, just smiled wider. "Clarice said you'd understand." That name did it. Clarice. My mother had found yet another way to erase me, legally this time. I didn't sign. I didn't tear it up either. I folded the form in half and slid it into my back pocket. I wasn't sure why I kept it. Instinct, maybe, or spite. The woman's smile twitched. She gave a little nod and walked off. I leaned against the nearest car, the heat from the hood seeping through my jeans. The bottle of water sat unopened beside me. If I signed that paper, I'd be everything they said I was. Quiet, easy, non-existent. If I refused, I'd be the troublemaker, the angry one, the bitter sibling who ruined a wedding. It was a trap, and the walls were made of polite smiles and perfect lighting. I stared out toward the guests drifting between the lawn and cocktail tables. I imagined the stories already forming in their heads. She always kept to herself. She was probably jealous. Some people just don't know how to be happy for others. They didn't know a damn thing, but the thing that simmered most wasn't sadness anymore. It was precision, like a blade finally being sharpened after years of being dulled on purpose. I felt Vera's eyes on me again. She had drifted a few steps away, but before she reached the main hall, she turned back. Her voice was clear. "Keep that form," she said. "You may need it, not to sign, but to show." And with that she walked inside. I stood alone again, but this time the quiet didn't sting. It buzzed, like electricity before a storm. Somewhere inside, a server dropped a tray and people gasped. But Malcolm wasn't paying attention to the spill. He was staring at an email on his phone. An email not meant for him. The tray crashed near the hors d'oeuvres table, and everyone gasped. But not Malcolm. He stood near the window, one hand wrapped around his phone, the other tucked into his jacket pocket. His posture had shifted, subtle, but unmistakable. The slack in his shoulders was gone. He wasn't watching the mess. He was reading something serious. Inside the glowing screen was an email that had slipped through the cracks, a forgotten forwarding rule from an old shared inbox during the early days of their wedding planning. He recognized the sender instantly. Law Office of Nancy J. Kincaid. Subject: Next Steps, Marriage Asset Consolidation. The email was addressed to Delphine. Lines stood out like sirens. Proceed with final stage 30 days post-merger. Once marital assets are integrated, execute quietly. He'll never suspect if you keep smiling. Malcolm didn't say a word. He didn't storm out, didn't demand an explanation. Instead, he slid the phone into his pocket and scanned the room. When his eyes landed on Vera, something passed between them. A nod. Barely there. He crossed the floor and whispered, "We were right." Vera didn't ask. She just pressed her lips together and answered, "Get the prenup?" He turned on his heel and walked straight toward the coordinator's tent. Back outside, I hadn't moved from my spot near the parking loop. But I felt it. The air was different, more electric, like a curtain was about to drop, and no one inside had rehearsed what came next. I didn't know what Vera had seen or what Malcolm had read, but I knew when the atmosphere changed, and it had changed. 3 days earlier, Vera had called me late at night. Her voice was calm, but there was steel behind it. "Have you ever wondered why Delphine always knows where Malcolm is?" I had laughed bitterly. "Delphine doesn't trust shadows. She checks the locks twice." Vera replied, "He gave her his laptop password last year. I told him to change it. He didn't." That afternoon, Malcolm ran a security scan, just in case. And what he found wasn't just spyware. It was remote access software installed months ago, hidden under an old event planning tool Delphine had asked him to try. The app had permissions to track keystrokes, screenshots, even location pings. He hadn't told anyone, not even Vera, not until today. Now, watching him disappear into the reception tent, I knew that line had finally snapped. Across the garden path, Vera reappeared with a folded slip of paper in her hand. She walked straight toward me, no pretense. "This landed in my inbox yesterday," she said, holding it out. "Same law firm, same language, wrong address." I unfolded the printout. It was another email thread, different timestamp, but unmistakably familiar. Delphine had sent instructions to the lawyer, requesting clarification on Malcolm's asset categories. Her tone was professional, cold, calculating. "They're playing all of us," Vera said quietly, "but I think it's time we played back." My chest tightened, not from fear, from clarity. This wasn't paranoia, this wasn't rivalry, this was strategy, and I had just been drafted to the other side. I slipped the paper into the same pocket where the waiver form still sat. We didn't hug. We didn't speak again. She just nodded once and walked back inside. Moments later, I saw Clarice. She was near the rose fountain, flanked by the wedding planner and one of the venue staff. They were whispering, glancing toward me like I'd grown a second head. Clarice's expression had shifted for the first time all day. Worry. She motioned toward the planner, said something clipped, and turned her gaze toward me. I didn't look away. Not this time. I just held her stare. Her mouth tightened. Her hands fidgeted with the pearls at her collar. For the first time, she wasn't in control. Then, near the bar, Malcolm reappeared. He spoke briefly to a staffer, then placed both hands on the counter and ordered a whiskey. No garnish, no ice. Just poured, straight. A moment later, my phone buzzed. One word from Vera. "Tonight." I exhaled slowly. Because the plan wasn't revenge. It was exposure. I could feel it in my spine, the shift, the beginning of the unraveling. A breeze had picked up, cooling the sweat behind my knees as I stood near the parking loop. The sun was lower now, everything cast in gold, even the lies. That's when it happened. A woman in a silky blush dress and oversized hat teetered her way toward me on glittery wedges, holding a half-empty champagne flute. She squinted at me. "Oh, good valet," she slurred, dangling her car keys like bait. "Can you bring the Lexus around? The gray one with the little hula dancer on the dash?" I blinked. I was still in the black event staff t-shirt Clarice insisted I wear. My hair was pulled back in a way that made me look more like someone's assistant than someone's sister. The woman pulled a $5 bill from her clutch and held it out. "Bless your heart. Weddings are brutal, huh?" I stared at the cash, then at her. And then I dropped the bill into the nearest trash can without saying a word. Her jaw fell open, but I'd already turned away. I pulled my phone from my back pocket and tapped into the thread Vera had forwarded me earlier. My fingers scrolled slowly, careful not to miss anything. It was Delphine's message to her lawyer. "We'll sign the prenup to shut Vera up, then void it quietly after the merger. Malcolm won't even notice. He's too busy playing the good guy." A cold chill settled over me. They hadn't just humiliated me. They were about to defraud a man in front of 200 witnesses, and smile while doing it. I looked down at my outfit one more time. Then I walked to my car, threw open the back door, and yanked out the outfit I'd worn earlier. My navy jumpsuit, simple jewelry, low heels. I changed behind the car, tucked my hair into a twist, and applied lipstick in the mirror of my visor. When I looked up, I didn't see the help anymore. I saw someone who knew too much, and had nothing left to lose. "I'm not your valet," I muttered under my breath. "And I'm done playing nice." I walked back up the gravel path, past the archway wrapped in fake peonies, toward the main reception tent. As soon as I stepped onto the stone porch, I felt it. The eyes. A few servers froze mid-step. The wedding planner whispered urgently into her earpiece. A security guard shifted in place. Clarice was standing near the fountain, chatting with a family friend. When she spotted me, her smile flickered like a bad signal. She walked fast, intercepting me near the guest book table. "What do you think you're doing?" she hissed under her breath, keeping her expression tight for the surrounding guests. I pulled out the folded waiver from my pocket and held it up. "Relax," I said calmly. "I didn't sign it." Her hand twitched. "You were told to stay outside." "I was told a lot of things," I replied, stepping past her. "But this one's my decision." She reached for my arm, but I'd already moved on. Inside, the music was softer, slow jazz humming through the air. Chandeliers sparkled like they didn't know the ceiling was about to fall in. People turned, some whispered. Then Delphine saw me. She froze mid-laugh, her champagne glass pausing an inch from her mouth. Our eyes locked. She blinked like I was a ghost, a glitch in the simulation. I walked toward the bar. Malcolm was there, drink in hand, speaking low to Vera. She looked up and nodded at me once, quick and certain. "It's time," she said. The planner noticed us then, hovering too close for coincidence. I turned to her and smiled. "Do me a favor," I said. "You might want to record this part." Malcolm stood tall, adjusted his tie, and stepped onto the stage meant for toasts. He raised his hand once and the band stopped mid-chord. Forks dropped, glasses paused. Conversations died mid-sentence. He cleared his throat. "Before dinner, I need to say something." Delphine smiled tightly, walking toward him, but he didn't look at her. He looked out into the crowd. "About who I am, and who I'm marrying." And in that moment, just for a second, her smile cracked. The air didn't shift, it cracked. Delphine's expression twitched, the edges of her mouth faltering as Malcolm's words echoed across the ballroom. There was a hesitation in the crowd, like a group inhale waiting to exhale. Malcolm stepped forward, the mic firm in his hand. His voice didn't waver. "Before we begin dinner, I think we all deserve honesty." He reached into the inside pocket of his suit jacket and pulled out a neatly folded document. My chest tightened. I already knew what it was. Vera had shown it to me hours earlier. "This is a prenup agreement we were both meant to honor," Malcolm said. He looked directly at Delphine. "But she sent instructions to her attorney to void it. 30 days after this wedding, after our assets merged." A gasp rippled through the room. Somewhere in the back, a fork clattered against a plate. Delphine blinked, her eyes darting toward the exit, then back to Malcolm. She opened her mouth, but said nothing. He unfolded the paper, lifted it high enough for the crowd to see. "Would you like to read it, Delphine?" he asked, offering it toward her. "Since you wrote it?" She didn't move. I watched her face, how it searched the room for someone to rescue her. But this time, no one came. Clarice, of course, did what Clarice always did. She moved quickly, stepping forward in heels that struck the marble floor too loud, too sharp. "That's enough," she snapped. "You're humiliating her. You're ruining her wedding." Malcolm turned his eyes on her. Calm, steel. "She did that when she lied." Clarice's head snapped toward me, venom already coating her voice. "You've poisoned this family. You've always been bitter, a troublemaker. And that's when I heard him. No. It wasn't a shout, it was firmer. Like a stone dropped in a still lake. Everyone turned. Russell. My father. He stepped into the light slowly, his posture straighter than I remembered, his voice clearer than I'd ever heard. She didn't ruin this family, he said. We did. The room stilled again, breathless. Clarice stared at him, aghast. You're siding with her? He shook his head. I'm not siding. I'm confessing. He turned to face the crowd, our family, their friends, all the strangers who came for champagne and floral centerpieces and fairy tale lies. For years we looked the other way. Every time Clarice played favorites. Every time Delphine twisted things. We let it happen. His voice broke slightly, but he continued. Fiona wasn't a problem. She was inconvenient, and we failed her. I didn't know I was crying until I tasted salt. Delphine tried to recover. She stepped forward, holding out her hands like a magician trying to recapture a spell gone wrong. They're making this up, she said. This is fake. All of it. But then Vera stepped forward, measured, composed. Then explain the email. The surveillance software you installed on Malcolm's devices. The prenup language that matches your own drafts. She raised an eyebrow. And the hard drive we found in the bridal suite closet, hidden behind a bouquet box. Want to explain that too? Delphine's mouth opened, then closed. Fiona, the shadow, the background noise, the one in black by the cars, was now at the center of the room. And for once, Delphine had no script to steal the spotlight back. She let out a strangled breath. Then she did what she always did when things didn't go her way. She bolted. The mic slipped from her hand, crashing to the ground with a screech of feedback. She stormed toward the doors, but her dress snagged on the leg of a chair and tore near the hemline. A sharp rip, a stunned silence, followed by gasps. No one followed her. At least not yet. Clarice stood frozen. Her eyes flicked to me, not with fury this time, but something else. Recognition. For the first time, she looked at me and didn't see a problem to manage. She saw a reckoning. Then she turned, gathering the folds of her shawl around her, and followed her golden daughter out the ballroom doors. The music didn't start back up. Nobody toasted, and no one dared pretend it was still a wedding. The doors hadn't even closed behind Clarice when the shift began. It wasn't loud. No shouts, no slammed glasses, just the air thinning. Conversations dropped off like someone had pulled a plug. It was the kind of silence you don't notice at first, until it's everywhere. People started to stand. One by one, guests tucked away napkins, glanced toward the exits, murmured to spouses. The hum of a ruined evening filled the space like low static. The ballroom, once glowing and packed, now emptied like a tide pulling back. There was no dinner, no champagne towers, no photo booth line, no bouquet toss. The music had died hours early, and so had the fairy tale. Malcolm sat at the sweetheart table, alone, his tie loosened, a drink untouched beside him. Vera moved calmly around the venue staff, quietly giving instructions, making sure the cleanup started gently, without the sound of defeat. My phone buzzed, a message, from Clarice. Come to the side hall, let's talk. No apology, no context, just a command, dressed as an invitation. I read it once, then pressed and held the screen. Delete conversation? The phone asked. Yes, because for the first time, I didn't feel like explaining myself anymore. I didn't feel like being summoned, and I sure as hell didn't feel like being managed. Instead, I walked over to Vera, who stood beside the dessert table that hadn't even been uncovered. She looked up from a checklist and offered me a quiet smile. I pulled the folded document from my pocket. The waiver, still unsigned, still blank. I handed it to her. She took it gently, as if handling evidence. This, she said, snapping a photo with her phone. This is what we call intimidation. But now, she looked up at me, sharp and certain. Now it's a receipt. She tucked the paper into her clutch. I've got lawyers, and a few friends who owe me favors in places where scandals don't go unnoticed. I didn't ask what she meant. I just knew that, for once, I wasn't the one being erased. I took a deep breath and turned away. The reception hall had dimmed slightly, as if even the chandeliers were tired. I walked through the space slowly, the echo of my heels tapping softly against the polished floor. A few guests lingered in clusters, whispering. Some looked at me with discomfort, some with pity, a few with respect? I didn't return any glances, didn't wave, didn't flinch. Clarice was nowhere in sight. Delphine either, and I didn't care. I'd spoken without shouting, stood up without a mic, told the truth without ever raising my voice. I passed the table where I once would have sat. White linen, untouched silverware, a name card that never had my name, and I kept walking. As I neared the exit, someone was waiting. Russell. He didn't say a word, he didn't try to hug me, or apologize, or ask for forgiveness wrapped in excuses. Instead, he held out his phone. A photo on the screen, 2 little girls, one in a glittery store-bought princess dress, the other in a crooked homemade dragon costume, half slipping off one shoulder. Me. I looked at him. His eyes were glassy, his face tired, but he gave a single nod. That was all. I stepped past him. Out the ballroom. Out of the story they'd written for me. Outside, the air had cooled. Dusk had turned to full night, and the fairy lights twinkled over the courtyard like nothing had happened. Like the night hadn't shattered. Mason's car was already waiting. He didn't step out, didn't open the door. He just waited. I slid in beside him, shutting the door behind me. He glanced at me, didn't ask. I exhaled. Long, deep, like air I'd been holding for years finally left my lungs. We didn't speak, he just drove. And for once I wasn't walking away, I was walking out. By the time we reached the city line, the car ride had settled into a calm kind of quiet, the kind you don't rush to fill. Mason didn't ask where I wanted to go. He just drove, as if the answer wasn't a destination, but a feeling. We stopped for drive-through milkshakes at a place we used to love back in college. Chocolate for him, strawberry for me. Something about that felt like reclamation, not nostalgia exactly. More like a gentle reminder. Not all endings taste bitter. The next morning, I woke to the sun breaking through thin curtains in Mason's guest room. For the first time in years, I didn't check my phone before stretching. When I did, though, headlines were already waiting. Charleston heiress's wedding implodes amid legal leak. Prenup scandal rocks Southern society circle. Screenshots of Delphine's emails had hit a few forums overnight. I didn't post them. Neither did Vera. But someone had. Someone with access and, apparently, a conscience. Her Instagram went dark. No stories, no reels, just silence where there used to be branded joy. The comments under her last bridal glam post were ruthless. So that's why the cake never got cut. I knew something was shady. Girl gave networking, not love. Lawsuit pending energy? Yikes. She wasn't canceled exactly, but the glow, gone. Malcolm filed for annulment the following Monday. Vera, quiet as ever, made no statement, but she did make a donation to a women's legal advocacy center in Charleston. In my name. I didn't ask for that, but I didn't return it either. Clarice, on the other hand, disappeared offline completely. Her Facebook scrubbed clean of anything tagged wedding. No new posts, no profile pic, just one voicemail on my phone. I know I failed, I don't know how to fix that. No plea, no tears. Still, I didn't reply. I didn't block her either. But I wasn't ready to hand her my peace, wrapped in forgiveness she hadn't earned. Some silences are less about anger and more about boundaries. Back in Atlanta, I started small. Took on a freelance gig helping a local nonprofit restructure their operations. Nothing flashy. But it felt good to be useful again. On my terms. I started jogging again. Just a mile or two in the early morning. It helped clear the thoughts that still clung some days. The weight of old patterns. The echoes of a family that always made me feel like background noise. I bought a necklace, not for show, not to match anything, just a thin silver chain with a small F charm, a name I didn't need anyone else to validate. I never rewatched the wedding video. Didn't need to. Sometimes closure isn't about tying the bow, it's about walking away from the box altogether. Weeks later, I got mail. A small white envelope, no return address. But the handwriting made my chest tighten. Inside was a photo. 2 little girls, side by side in a driveway. One wore a glittery costume from a catalog. The other wore a lopsided dragon tail made of old towels and duct tape. Me. Tucked behind the photo was a note. Just 3 lines. I should have made you both feel seen. You were never invisible to me. Dad. I didn't cry, but I kept the photo, not for memory's sake, but to remind myself that even flawed people sometimes find their voice, even if it comes late. Now, most evenings, I sit out on the porch of the duplex I rent. It's nothing fancy. The wood creaks in the wrong spots, but it's mine, quiet, chosen. Tonight, I sipped mint tea as the last of the light melted behind the trees. Mason called from inside. You okay out there? I smiled into the dusk. I'm not okay, I called back, voice steady. I'm something better. I looked at the horizon, let the quiet settle around me like armor I'd finally earned. Then softly, to no one but myself, I whispered, I choose me. Before you scroll past, I want to say something I wish someone had said to me a long time ago. If you've ever felt like the outsider in your own family, if you've ever sat quietly in a room full of people who were supposed to love you and still felt like a stranger, this is for you. You are not alone, you are not invisible, and you are not required to keep shrinking yourself to fit into a space that was never made to hold all of you. Too often, we're taught that keeping the peace means keeping quiet. That being the bigger person means swallowing hurt, ignoring disrespect, or pretending things don't cut as deep as they do. But here's the truth. Peace that costs you your voice, your worth, your identity, that's not peace. That's silence disguised as survival. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do isn't leaving. It's choosing to walk away with your head high, without bitterness, without begging, and without needing anyone's approval. Choosing peace over permission, dignity over validation, yourself over the version of you they expect. It took me 37 years to stop waiting for someone to pick me, to stop bending backwards hoping someone would see my value. And the day I finally chose myself, that day changed everything. Was it easy? No. But was it worth it? Every damn bit. You may never get the apology you deserve. You may never hear the words you've been aching to hear since you were a kid. That doesn't make your pain any less real, and it sure doesn't make your healing any less valid. So let me ask you something straight up. Have you ever kept your mouth shut to keep the peace, even though it tore you up inside? Have you ever played small just to avoid making others uncomfortable? And if so, are you ready to stop doing that? I'd love to hear your story. Whether it's messy, raw, unfinished, none of that disqualifies it. We don't heal by hiding. We heal by speaking, by sharing, by knowing we're not the only ones. If this hit something in you, if it stirred up a truth you've been afraid to say, drop a 1 in the comments or let me know where you're watching from. If it didn't land, that's okay too. I want to hear from you anyway. Tell me what felt off.
Hi, my name's Kaylin. 15 years ago, my parents left me in a deserted field and drove away. No goodbye, no explanation, just dust, silence, and a lesson they said I needed to learn. They thought I'd break. But last month, they showed up at a house they didn't know I owned, my house, and when I opened the door, their faces turned pale. Now they want to talk. Now they remember I exist. But what do you do when the people who erased you suddenly want to rewrite your ending? Would you let them back in? Or would you finally tell the truth they spent years trying to bury? Let me tell you what happened. The last time my mother's voice echoed in my ear, it wasn't in person. It was a voicemail, short, hollow, laced with a sweetness she never used on me when I was a child. 15 years of silence, and now she wanted to talk. I didn't press play again. I already knew every beat, every word, and the artificial softness behind them. I sat on the edge of my sofa, phone still in hand, and let my eyes drift toward the bottom drawer of the old pine cabinet in my den. I knew what was in there. Hadn't looked at it in years, but knew every detail. When I finally opened it, the smell of faded paper and wood polish hit me before I even touched the photo. There we were, my family, in a backyard I no longer claimed. Dad with one arm around Delaney, Mom laughing with that effortless tilt of her head. Me? I was at the edge of the frame, staring directly at the camera, expression blank, arms stiff at my sides. That was always my place. Not beside them, not part of the center, just tolerated. Growing up in Wren Hollow, I quickly learned that the idea of family was more performance than truth, especially in our house. Delaney was the golden child. Report cards stuck to the fridge like trophies, her name on every PTA board and church choir list. Meanwhile, I was the kid who was too quiet, too sensitive, or just not like Delaney. At 6, I remember standing by the kitchen doorway, clutching my doll to my chest, listening to Mom talking to the Carlson family from next door. I heard her laugh and say, "Kaylin? Oh, she's different, not wired like Delaney. But we try." That stuck with me. Not just the words, but the way she lowered her voice, as if I were a subject of polite disappointment. I stopped showing them my drawings after that. I stopped trying to make them laugh. By the time I turned 10, I had figured out how to become invisible in my own home, which made what happened that summer feel almost predictable in hindsight. It was supposed to be a family bonding weekend. That's what Mom called it. We packed up the truck, tent, water jugs, canned beans, sleeping bags, and headed out to the desert about 30 minutes north. It was remote, dry, and quiet, the kind of place where even cell service gave up. I remember thinking it felt like another planet. We set up camp like usual. Delaney laid out the mats. Dad tinkered with the cooler. Mom passed around juice boxes. Then, just before sundown, Mom pulled me aside. "Kaylin," she said, kneeling so we were eye level, "we think it's time you learned how to do a few things on your own. Survival skills, okay? Like in Girl Scouts." "I'm not in Girl Scouts," I said quietly. She smiled, as if I had missed the point. "Well, that's why this is so important. You'll thank us later." They left before I could form a question. I watched the truck roll down the dusty road until it was just a blur behind heat waves. I waited. Minutes turned to hours. Night fell like a curtain, and I had no flashlight, just a bottle of water and a half-used pack of crackers. At some point, I stopped expecting them to come back. I don't remember how many hours I walked, or in which direction. I just remember my lips cracking from dryness, my legs trembling, and the surreal thought in my head. So this is how people disappear. A highway patrol officer found me by chance around dawn, walking along the shoulder in mismatched shoes. One mine, one Delaney's hand-me-down I had grabbed by mistake in the dark. He radioed something I didn't catch and gave me a look I still can't name. They took me in. The station smelled like burnt coffee and floor cleaner. I sat on a bench while officers whispered, dialed numbers, typed reports. My name was misspelled twice in their system. When someone asked for my parents' contact information, I gave it. They called. No one picked up. Then the whispers started. "Parents say she ran away. File's a mess. Doesn't add up. Kids don't end up out there by accident." I was placed in a holding room for minors. I remember watching the dust in the sunlight coming through the slats of a half-closed window. One officer handed me a peanut butter sandwich and a blanket. No one asked what I had seen. No one asked if I was scared. They treated me like a riddle they weren't sure they wanted to solve. I stayed there for 3 nights. By the 4th, someone from social services came with a clipboard and a look of mild concern. She asked if I had any relatives, anyone who might take me in. I gave her a name, someone they hadn't mentioned, someone my parents hadn't spoken to in years, Mavis Aldridge, my grandmother, and that's when everything truly started to change. But before I could knock on her door, there was one more place I had to try. The cab pulled up to a familiar street, tree-lined, neat lawns, quiet like a staged photograph. I sat in the back seat, watching my childhood home grow larger through the window, until it wasn't just a memory anymore. It was real again. Too real. The social worker, Miss Carver, turned around from the front seat. "Are you sure about this?" she asked, her voice soft, like she was talking to a wounded bird. I nodded. "I just need to see something." She didn't push. The engine clicked as it cooled. I opened the car door slowly and stepped out. Gravel shifted beneath my shoes as I walked toward the house. My house. At least, it used to be. The paint on the porch rails was still flaking, same pale blue that once chipped under my fingernails when I was 6 and told to scrape it for family chore day. I knocked once, footsteps. Then the door opened, halfway. My mother didn't step out. She didn't look surprised either. "We already explained everything to the police," she said flatly. "This is a legal issue now. Please leave." She didn't ask if I was hungry. Didn't ask how long I'd been gone. Didn't ask anything. The door closed before I could say a word. I stood there for a second longer than I should have, letting the silence slap me again. It wasn't shock, not anymore. It was confirmation. Back in the car, Miss Carver didn't say anything for a while. When we pulled onto the highway, she spoke without looking at me. "There's a Mavis Aldridge listed, maternal grandmother." "I know her," I said. "You want me to reach out?" "Yes." She scribbled something on her clipboard and made the call on speaker. A woman answered, voice scratchy with age, but clear. Miss Carver introduced herself, explained the situation, asked if Mavis would be willing to take temporary guardianship. There was a pause. Then, "I'll come get her." No hesitation, no conditions. 3 hours later, I was sitting in a different car, driving past the outer edge of Wren Hollow. We passed dry fields and old signs, some too sun-bleached to read. Eventually, we pulled into a dusty driveway outside a small adobe-style home with a metal rooster nailed to the fence. The screen door squeaked as Mavis stepped out, wiping her hands on a dish rag. She didn't say much, just looked at me for a moment, then gave a small nod, like she'd already made up her mind long before I arrived. "You don't have to talk if you don't want to," she said, ushering me in, "but you'll sleep safe here." Inside smelled like thyme and something baking. A simple kitchen, a small living room with a crooked lamp, a shelf full of old mystery novels. It was a quiet house, but not empty. There was a difference. That night, she made stew. No speech, no awkward questions, just a bowl, a spoon, and a soft eat. I didn't even realize how hungry I was until halfway through. The bed in the guest room was too soft. I couldn't sleep at first. My thoughts jumped from place to place. My mother's face at the door, the officer's shrug when they logged me in, the click of the lock turning from the inside. Eventually, I got up and wandered through the house. Mavis was in the living room, writing a letter by hand. She looked up but didn't ask why I was awake, just pushed a folded blanket toward me and said, "Sit if you want." We didn't talk. She wrote. I watched. Her pen moved slow, like it had nowhere urgent to be. The next morning, I followed her outside. She had a small garden behind the house. Nothing fancy, just tomatoes, herbs, some struggling roses. I didn't ask to help. I just started pulling weeds next to her. That became our rhythm. She never asked for stories, and I never volunteered them. But we shared things. Breakfast, radio stations, the occasional crossword puzzle. And for the first time, I felt like I wasn't being watched for cracks. One afternoon, I picked up a book from her shelf, an old paperback with a faded cover. I didn't read it to escape. I read because I wanted to understand. The words were heavier now. They stayed longer. Later that week, I found an empty notebook in the drawer next to the couch. I started writing. Not about them. Not yet. Just thoughts. Lists. Observations. Sentences with no home. On the inside cover, I eventually wrote, "I may not have roots, but I can still grow." The garden soil under my nails was starting to feel less like dirt and more like something earned. After that day in the notebook, I started moving differently. Not faster, just with a kind of quiet focus. I didn't tell Mavis I'd decided to find work. I just woke up earlier, packed a snack, and walked to the diner off Main Street to ask if they needed help. They didn't ask about my age. They just handed me a stack of plates and told me to start wiping. I stayed quiet, worked hard, and by the end of the week, they gave me a schedule. Morning shifts, prepping, washing, running back and forth. It wasn't glorious, but it was mine. Between shifts, I started folding newspapers for the town route. That paid in quarters and blisters, but I didn't care. Every envelope with my name on it made me feel like I existed in ways that no family photo ever did. I used the money to buy a used phone off a guy at the laundromat. It had a cracked screen, half the storage gone, but it worked. I also started walking to the library on my days off. I didn't tell anyone why, but the truth was simple. I was going to get my GED, with or without applause. While other girls at school posted selfies in new clothes or snapped weekend pics with friends, I had spreadsheets and receipts. And surprisingly, I didn't feel sorry about it. There was a weird freedom in not owing anyone an explanation. When kids whispered in class about how I wore the same jeans 3 times a week, I didn't flinch. I didn't need their approval. I was too busy building. It was during a weekend shift at the laundromat that something changed. The owner, Ray, had been struggling with inventory for months. Towels were disappearing. Detergent stock kept running low. One day he muttered, "Wish I could keep better track of this crap." Something about the way he said it stuck with me. That night, I opened my borrowed laptop and pulled up a basic spreadsheet tool I'd learned to use at the library. I created a template, color-coded tabs, added simple formulas. It was ugly, but functional. The next day, I showed it to Ray on my phone. He squinted. "You made this?" I nodded. "Hell," he said. "Can it print?" Within a month, 3 other small businesses on the block were using the same tool. Modified, of course, but built from that same skeleton. That was the moment I realized I didn't just work. I created. It wasn't long after that I started spending my evenings with tutorials, forums, and user guides. I barely understood half of what I read, but I kept going. Persistence became its own kind of language. On my 17th birthday, not that anyone remembered it, I sat at Mavis's kitchen table with a warm mug of cocoa and opened my laptop. It took 2 hours, a minor breakdown, and 1 accidental site crash, but eventually I registered my domain. A one-woman LLC. No balloons, no cake, no one to hug me and say happy birthday. But for the first time, I had something with my name on it that no one could take away. I didn't tell Mavis right away, not because I was hiding it, but because it felt like holding a baby bird in my hand. I didn't want to expose it to the wind just yet. It wasn't pride. It was protection. Late that night, after she went to bed, I opened my notebook and flipped past the list of goals and scribbled thoughts. On a clean page, I wrote 1 sentence. I don't know what this is yet, but for once, it's mine. After a few weeks of running my little startup quietly from Mavis's kitchen table, I started building routines I could rely on. Coffee at 6, emails by 7, research until lunch. It felt like laying bricks under my own feet while walking forward. But even with the momentum, I still didn't expect the email. It showed up on a Tuesday afternoon, buried in a flood of client inquiries. The subject line was impersonal. New property alert, 822 Marlin Street. I nearly ignored it, but something about that address tugged at a place in my gut I'd thought had long gone numb. I clicked. There it was. My childhood house, same chipped siding, same front porch with the uneven step. But this time, listed as foreclosure pending, bank-owned, auction in 30 days. I stared at the screen for longer than I want to admit. Not because I was sad, those years had already dried up inside me, but because something colder replaced them. Not grief, not even anger. Control. I copied the MLS number into a private file and closed the tab. No flinching, no nostalgia, just math. That evening, I called my attorney, not the firm, just Elise, the one who handled quiet things. I gave her the property details and said, "Set up a holding LLC. I want that house. No trace back to me." She didn't ask why. She'd worked with survivors before. A week later, I visited the property just after dusk. I parked a block away, walked along the sidewalk like any stranger might. The lawn was overgrown, a few shingles scattered near the gutter. One of the front windows was boarded. The mailbox hung crooked, stuffed with unopened letters. Junk mail, a utility shutoff notice, an envelope from the Department of Revenue. I didn't go inside. I didn't need to. Standing there, I thought, they let it rot, just like they did with me. By the following Tuesday, Elise had closed the deal. The documents came through encrypted. I signed from my office, my logo visible in the corner of the screen. But no one at the bank would ever know my name. The deed arrived by courier. I opened it slowly and placed it in the drawer next to the photo I never fully had the courage to throw away. The one where I was 6 and standing too far from the rest of my family. Now it's mine, I whispered. Legally, financially, historically. I didn't toast. I didn't call anyone. This wasn't revenge, it was reclamation. Still, I couldn't let the house stay as it was. I called a contractor I trusted. Small team, good work, discreet. I told them to focus on safety and structure. Nothing cosmetic, no repainting, no new tiles. Just stabilize the bones. We kept it minimal. Removed the moldy carpet. Replaced termite-ridden floorboards. Secured the roofing. I told the team to leave the porch light as it was. Yellowed, flickering, faintly buzzing. One morning, I stopped by while the crew was on a lunch break. The smell of sawdust and old wood filled the air. I walked the perimeter, hands in pockets. That place had held so much silence, so much pretending, and now it answered to me. I didn't tell Mavis about the purchase, not yet. She would understand, but I needed it to exist without commentary. Some things had to be reclaimed in private. A few days later, I returned again alone, early enough that the sky was still rinsing out its night colors. I stood on the lawn, watching one of the workers pry up the porch planks, each pull a kind of exorcism. When he noticed me, he asked, "You want to keep any of this old wood?" I shook my head. "Let it go." He nodded and went back to work. I stayed for a while longer, long enough to see the debris piled beside the sidewalk. Bits of the past laid bare for anyone to walk past and not even notice. I didn't. By the end of that week, most of the renovation crew had cleared out. The air inside the house didn't smell like mildew anymore. It smelled like nothing, and that felt right. I walked room to room one morning, barefoot on new floors, trying to remember which corner had once held the bookshelf my father refused to let me touch. Where the old dining table used to sit, the one they never made room for me at during holidays. It was all gone now, erased. Except the bones. The bones stayed. I had just finished setting a tray with 2 mugs of chamomile, out of habit more than intention, when I saw the SUV roll up. Dark gray, polished, clearly leased. The kind people drove when they wanted you to know they were doing fine, even when they weren't. 3 doors opened. My mother stepped out first, her posture stiff like she was walking into a courtroom. My father followed, slower, gaze down, keys still in hand, as if unsure whether to lock the car. Then came Delaney. Perfect posture, perfect hair. The same icy smile she wore at 13 when she told me no one wanted me at her birthday sleepover. They didn't knock, just walked toward the porch like it still belonged to them. I didn't meet them outside. I stood inside, behind the window's sheer curtain, letting them guess if I'd answer. I opened the door without a word. My mother blinked first. "We didn't realize the bank sold it already," she said, the kind of tone reserved for complaints at customer service counters. I stepped back slightly, just enough for them to enter. "They did," I said. "To me." The words didn't land right away. It took a few seconds for my father's eyes to scan the hallway, the repainted trim, the absence of family photos. "You bought it?" he asked, like I'd said I'd robbed a bank. "I did," I replied, calm even. "Legally, quietly, permanently." No one sat until I motioned to the living room. The furniture was neutral, clean, modern, not inviting. That was on purpose. I brought out the tea tray and placed it between us. No sugar, no cream. Delaney took in the room with a quick sweep, eyes pausing on the bare mantel. "It looks different, feels bigger," I kept my gaze steady. Things grow better when they're not starved. My father shifted in his seat, forced a smile. We always knew you'd do well eventually, Kale. That name. No one had called me that in over a decade. It slid off his tongue, like he still had rights to it. I didn't answer. Instead, I turned to my mother. Why are you here? She looked at Delaney, who cleared her throat like she'd rehearsed. We thought maybe we could talk, figure out a way forward. I waited. Maybe this house could bring us back together, she added. It's where it all started, after all. I gave them a long, quiet look. Then, slowly, I folded my hands on my lap and said, Let me be clear, I didn't invite you. You came here assuming something was owed. Delaney's lips tightened. That's not what we're saying. My mother jumped in. We're family. Blood matters. I leaned forward just enough to be heard. If you're here for money, you should leave. If you're here for clarity, I'll pour another cup. No one moved. My father opened his mouth, then closed it. Delaney's fingers curled around her mug, but she didn't drink. The air thickened with the kind of silence only history can create. No yelling, no slamming doors. Just the sound of everything unspoken pressing against the walls. They didn't walk out angry. They walked out calculating. 3 days later, an email landed in my inbox. The sender? Delaney. The subject line. Thinking of you? That alone should have told me it was a trap, but I opened it anyway. There was a photo attached, me, about 5 years old, in a sun hat too big for my head, sitting next to Delaney on a faded picnic blanket. I don't remember the moment. Judging by the tightness in my smile and the way my arms were pulled into myself, I probably didn't enjoy it. The message beneath was short, almost sweet. Dad's business is struggling. We hoped you might want to talk. You know, as family. Maybe this is the time to come back together. There was no apology, no, we were wrong. Just a sentence wrapped in sentimentality, a pitch dressed like a memory. I didn't respond. Instead, I forwarded the message to my assistant, Emily, and asked her to pull financials, anything she could find publicly on my father's company. I told her to look for anything on Lorraine and Delaney, too. She didn't ask why. Emily had seen enough to stop wondering. That afternoon, while I waited for her findings, I walked downtown and ordered a coffee. I sat by the window, stirring it too long, thinking about how quickly they moved from silence to expectation. Not once had they asked me how I survived. But now that things were falling apart, I was suddenly worth remembering. Emily called later with the facts. His insurance firm is practically bankrupt, she said. Multiple missed filings, overdue taxes. Your mom's condo? She pulled a second mortgage last year. It's bleeding. And your sister? You'll love this. 2 civil suits pending. Fraud and misrepresentation. One's from a former client. The other? A friend. I let out a breath, then said, Print it. All of it. By the next day, I had the folder in hand. I didn't need this for satisfaction. I needed it for clarity. I chose a small restaurant in Wren Hollow to meet. Neutral ground, public, controlled. I arrived early and sat at the back, ordered water, and placed the folder on the table like a quiet threat. They showed up together. Lorraine wore a shawl, her version of looking fragile. Rhett looked older than I remembered, more tired than apologetic. Neither hugged me. We're glad you came, my mother said, like she was inviting me to a brunch I hadn't RSVP'd for. I slid the folder across the table without a word. They exchanged glances, flipped through a few pages. Delaney didn't bother hiding her frown. I know what you need, I said finally. But I also know what I won't do. My father tried the soft approach. We took care of you. We did what we could. No, I interrupted quietly. You left me in the desert. Now you're drowning. And you want me to throw a rope. Delaney's voice cut in. You're being dramatic. I turned to her. You're being entitled. My mother stiffened. Family means stepping up, whether we're perfect or not. I leaned back. Family means not watching someone disappear and pretending you didn't see it. They didn't argue after that. Not really, they just sat there. And after a few awkward bites of salad and forced pleasantries, they left. No hug, no closure. Just the same exit I remembered from every dinner I wasn't invited to as a kid. That night, I got the notification. Lorraine had posted a status on Facebook, just vague enough to avoid naming me, but clear enough for anyone who knew us. Raised a daughter alone. We gave everything we had. Now she won't even help us save our home. The post started picking up likes, sympathy comments, old friends chiming in with, "You were always so strong," and "Kids today have no loyalty." I stared at the screen. Not angry, just alert. I didn't reply. I didn't comment. I didn't block her either. I printed the post. Then I pulled out another folder and added it to the pile. If they wanted to start a campaign, they'd learn I wasn't the girl who needed to be rescued anymore. They didn't ask for help. They demanded gratitude. That's not the same thing. By Thursday, the post had been shared over 300 times. I hadn't realized how many people still kept tabs on the Gaskills. Old neighbors, church acquaintances, people who hadn't spoken to me in years suddenly had opinions again. The comments ranged from gentle disappointment to open condemnation. She was always a handful. Some people forget who raised them. Guess money changes everything. At first, I ignored them. I kept my head down, my calendar full. But on Friday morning, right in the middle of a quarterly strategy call, Emily slipped a printed article onto my desk. Her expression warned me before I read the headline. Daughter of the Year, CEO leaves aging parents homeless. It wasn't just a blog. It was syndicated across 3 business gossip sites, and had already made its way onto LinkedIn and Twitter. My face, my title, and a photo of the house I had bought, cropped just right to look cold and corporate, were now part of a story I hadn't written. I paused the call, asked the team to reconvene in an hour, and sat alone in my office. The skyline outside looked too clean, too distant. I read every word of the article. They quoted Lorraine, my mother, without naming her. A close family source. That was the mask she always wore best. I forwarded the link to legal, then, slowly, to my PR rep. An hour later, I was in a meeting room with Nicole, my communications manager, and the firm's outside consultant. They danced around the topic with words like optics and narrative opportunity, but I already knew what they were going to suggest. You could issue a statement, Nicole said carefully. Not defensive, just clarifying. I stared at her for a moment. You want me to explain to strangers why I didn't rescue the people who left me in the middle of nowhere? Nicole shifted. You don't have to tell the whole story, just enough to show you're not cold. I leaned forward, voice steady. If someone thinks I'm cold because I stopped being quiet, they were never listening in the first place. I didn't issue a statement. I started preparing a live stream. The next morning, I walked into the small video studio in our office tower. Just me, a single camera, and a simple title card, Kaylin Monroe. Live. No production team, no filters. I didn't want sympathy. I wanted the record to breathe. I looked directly at the lens and began. 15 years ago, I was left in the desert. Not figuratively, not poetically, literally. I told them everything, not with tears, not with a breaking voice, but with dates, documentation, names. I showed photos, my intake form from the police station, a time-stamped photo of me walking barefoot along the highway, school attendance reports, letters from social workers. I displayed it all like pieces on a courtroom table, and then I read the Facebook post. I didn't name Lorraine. I didn't need to. Everyone had already connected the dots, but I followed with a statement that had been sitting at the base of my spine for years. I didn't humiliate them. I remembered what they wanted me to forget. After I ended the stream, I walked out of the studio and into my office. Emily had already pulled up our analytics dashboard. Thousands watching live. Tens of thousands already resharing. Some of the comments were brutal. She's using trauma to build her brand. Why now? She's still her parents' child. Where's the grace? But others cut through the noise like a clean breath. My mother did this to me too. Thank you for saying what I never could. You didn't ruin their image. They handed it to you. That night, I didn't sleep much. I read every comment, every message. I didn't respond to any of them. Not out of apathy, but because sometimes being heard was enough. You don't always need the last word. Just the first one they can't ignore. By Saturday, sponsors who had ghosted us quietly returned. 2 journalists reached out requesting full interviews. I declined. This wasn't about a story. This was a statement. Sometimes telling the truth doesn't set you free, but it makes silence impossible. Monday night, long after the office lights dimmed and the streets below quieted, I was still at my desk. The hum of the old building's heating system kept me company while I sifted through archived folders my assistant had flagged. I hadn't gone looking for vengeance. I went looking for proof. It arrived via encrypted file transfer. One of the private investigators I'd quietly hired months earlier had finally cracked a database tied to regional traffic camera archives. I'd nearly forgotten I'd asked for it. I clicked the folder. Inside was a single image, black and white, grainy, stamped with a date 15 years ago, just after sunset. A little girl, small in frame, walking down a deserted highway shoulder, with one shoe missing. Wind catching the hem of her oversized shirt. Her head turned toward the road, face unreadable, but posture screaming abandonment. It was me. I didn't blink, didn't cry. I forwarded the photo to my legal team with 6 words. Attach this to the public file. The next morning, I arrived early. While the team handled their usual tasks, I sat in my office and reviewed every item we had on record. Police reports, intake forms, housing records, old email correspondences. There were gaps, but now I had the image that made all their words collapse. Around noon, another update hit my inbox. This one came from the forensic IT analyst I'd hired through my startup's security vendor. They'd traced a malicious email sent 5 years ago to my university's scholarship board. The message accused me of falsifying records and manipulating faculty, claims that ultimately led to my funding being revoked just before graduation. Attached was a digital trail, IP address, timestamp, and access route. It linked back to a domain Delaney had used during her legal internship in Chicago. I didn't forward this one to press either. I downloaded it, saved it as a PDF, and sent it directly to Delaney. No subject, no message, just the file. 20 minutes later, her name popped up on my phone screen. I let it ring until it stopped. Then I powered the phone off and slid it into the drawer. That same afternoon, while walking to my car, I was handed an envelope by a process server standing near the lobby. Cease and desist. Lorraine's lawyer. They accused me of public defamation and misuse of family information for personal gain. They wanted me to take down my livestream, retract the documents. Cease further discussion of private family matters, the letter said. I handed the packet to my in-house counsel. He raised an eyebrow. Response? They had 15 years to speak, I said. I'm just catching up. We didn't countersue. We didn't escalate. Instead, my team posted a public document repository, available through a link in my company's press portal. It wasn't flashy, just facts. A school record showing repeated absences due to unspecified family reasons. An emergency room intake form from when I was 12, bruises down my ribs listed as fall-related, an anonymous email chain targeting my scholarship, the photo of me walking the highway alone, no captions, no commentary, just receipts. We pinned it at the top of my LinkedIn and company website. Some called it excessive, others called it brave, but I wasn't aiming to please anyone. This isn't about family, I wrote in the final line of the statement. It's about harm, and I won't let silence be a co-conspirator again. The fallout came in layers. Some clients backed out, not wanting drama. But newer, bigger clients signed on, citing my transparency and tenacity. A journalist emailed me asking if I planned to write a memoir. I said no. Another asked if I'd do a podcast interview. I said nothing. And still, the downloads on the public file kept rising. I didn't need revenge. I needed the record corrected, for me, and for the girl they left behind. The noise faded the way winter wind does after it's torn through a valley, slowly, without apology. No more headlines. No more anonymous comments. Just quiet. And in that stillness, she, the girl on the side of the road, stayed with me. She never left, not really. But now she wasn't begging to be heard. She just stood beside me, silent and undefeated. It was a week before Christmas, when I walked through the town square in Wren Hollow. The lights were already up, plastic candy canes staked into the grass, strings of yellow bulbs blinking lazily overhead. A local jazz trio played near the cider booth. I passed a vendor I used to fold papers for. He didn't recognize me. Or maybe he did, and just chose not to speak. That didn't hurt the way it once might have. I didn't expect warmth from this place. I didn't even want it. Across the street, a woman handed her daughter a bag of kettle corn. The girl laughed, the kind of unfiltered joy I used to envy. Now I just observed it, like someone watching a train pass they didn't need to board. I walked by the house, that house, on my way back to the car. Not because I wanted to see it, but because it was on the route. It looked clean, settled. Someone else had bought it. I'd sold it through a trust under another name. Never told Mavis. Never explained. There was nothing left for me in that house. Not a single piece of furniture. Not a shadow. I didn't stop walking. By January, the article had disappeared from the front page of any feed. Google alerts slowed. People moved on. But the impact lingered in quiet ways. A stranger thanking me at a conference. A handwritten note left at my office door from a young intern. Your voice helped me find mine. I didn't frame it. I didn't post it, but I kept it. When a news outlet reached out to ask if I'd let them film a feature, a powerful story of healing and reclamation, I declined. There's a difference between being witnessed and being showcased. My company found its rhythm again. Staff morale was higher than ever. When we landed a new international contract, they brought in cupcakes and balloons. I clapped with them, I smiled. But inside, I knew I had climbed something they would never see the peak of. Then came the envelope. Cream-colored, handwritten address. No return sender, but the script was familiar. Inside was a letter from Lorraine. Not an apology, just a retelling, a soft spin of things. We tried our best. You were difficult. It was complicated. We were scared. A curated mosaic of reasons. I read the first page. That was enough. I didn't rip it. I didn't burn it. I wrote back one sentence on a blank note card. I forgave you a long time ago, but I won't walk backward to prove it. I mailed it without expectation. That night, I sat on the rooftop of my apartment building with a blanket around my shoulders and a mug of tea in my hands. The city was quiet below, speckled with lights like a circuit board stretching into the horizon. Mavis called at midnight. Her voice was the same as always, dry, warm, practical. She didn't ask about the article or the video. She asked if I'd remembered to buy rock salt for the front steps. We talked about tomato seeds, weather patterns, a new book she'd read. Neither of us mentioned the past. That was the most peaceful part of all. Sometimes justice doesn't look like someone being punished. It looks like distance. It looks like not explaining anymore. It looks like peace. I didn't return for revenge. I rose so they'd have to look up. Before I end this story, let me share something, just between us, from one soul to another. I used to think justice meant getting an apology. A moment, a headline, something loud and clear that says, "You were right all along." But as life often teaches us, justice doesn't always come wrapped in noise. Sometimes it looks like walking away without bitterness. Sometimes it means choosing your peace over their approval. Forgiveness isn't about letting someone off the hook. It's about releasing yourself from the weight of what they'll never take responsibility for. If you've ever felt invisible, Uninvited or underestimated, I hope my story reminds you of this. You don't have to return to the fire to prove you've survived the burn. Your story is not defined by who failed you, but by who you chose to become despite it all. Now, I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever had to walk away from someone who never truly saw you? Do you believe forgiveness has to involve reconciliation? Or maybe you've stayed silent for too long and you're finally ready to be heard. Let's talk about it in the comments. If this story spoke to you, even just one sentence, drop a 1 below or tell me where you're watching from. And hey, if you didn't connect with it, that's okay too. Let me know why. Your voice matters here. If you'd like to hear more true stories that carry weight, heart, and lessons learned the hard way, don't forget to subscribe. Every story I share is meant to speak to the parts of us that don't always get a spotlight. So if you're still here, still listening, thank you. You're not alone. Hit that subscribe button so you never miss the next chapter. I'll see you in the comments. Hi, my name is Lark. They told me it was just a bruise, then left me limping through a canyon tour for 3 hours. Said I was being dramatic, again. Then they went to brunch while I sat alone in a hotel room, ankle fractured, name erased from the insurance list, replaced by my cousins. They didn't forget me. They planned around me. Now they're calling me the one who destroyed the family. But if all I did was tell the truth, why are they so scared? And why did it take a stranger's video to prove I was ever there at all? I stood there, gripping the strap of my overnight bag, while they all loaded into the van. Marlo was in the driver's seat, sunglasses on, tapping his phone like the rest of us didn't exist. Velda glanced at me once, just long enough to frown and ask, "You're not wearing that, are you?" No hello, no smile. Just critique, like clockwork. I should have known better than to expect anything different. The air was heavy with the kind of silence that comes when people pretend nothing's wrong. And still, I stood there, trying to find a space for myself in a trip that clearly had no room for me. I hoisted the bag into the trunk myself. No one moved to help. Not even a shift of weight. Just eyes locked on screens or away from me. I climbed into the van last. Velda sighed. "You could have been ready 10 minutes ago." Never mind that I'd been standing outside before anyone else. I slid into the seat behind the middle row. It was crammed and hot. I asked quietly if I could switch to the back to sit with Haley. Velda turned around like I'd insulted the Pope. "Can you not start with the drama this early?" Marlo snorted. "Just put her with the bags. She can't complain about legroom if she's already part of the luggage." That wasn't a joke. It was a sentence I'd heard versions of my whole life. By the time we hit the first gas station off I-35, the van smelled like snacks and stale judgment. I got out to stretch and walked gingerly on my right foot. It had been sore since yesterday. I wasn't sure if I'd twisted something, or if it was just the concrete floors from work, but I felt it every time I took a step. I mentioned it once, while Velda browsed the aisle of vitamin water, like it held answers to world peace. "I think I might have strained something in my foot." She didn't look up. "You're always like this. One small thing, and it becomes Shakespeare." She grabbed her drink and walked away. I stood there, alone in the middle of the convenience store, with a dull ache growing in my leg and a sharper one setting into my chest. I didn't say anything else the rest of that stop. Back in the van, I closed my eyes and tried not to think about the way Marlo kept glancing at me through the rearview mirror. Like I was a loaded gun, he didn't trust not to go off. The road stretched out forever. The kind of endless you can only feel in a van full of people who treat you like static. I remembered being 9, twisting my ankle at that birthday party. No adult helped me. Velda rolled her eyes and said, "If you can cry, you can walk." So I walked on a hairline fracture for 3 days. The only ice I got came in my soda. That's when I learned the trick. If you don't cry, they can't call you dramatic. It didn't mean you weren't hurting. It just meant they didn't have a reason to mock you out loud. I stopped crying that year. Not because the pain got better, but because no one ever came when I did. The scenery changed somewhere near the Utah border. The hills outside the window felt unfamiliar and unforgiving. My phone buzzed. Low battery. I reached for my mom's iPad in the side pouch and pulled up the itinerary. My name was listed near the bottom, misspelled. Lara. Not a big mistake, right? Just a typo. But when you're already the last person they packed for, when your snacks didn't make the grocery list, when your name is always an afterthought or a punchline, seeing it wrong again felt like the final punctuation mark on a lifetime of being overlooked. I didn't say anything. I didn't correct it. I just closed the iPad and stared at the road. The van slowed as we turned onto a gravel path leading toward the rental lodge. Marlo muttered something about bad directions, and Velda launched into commentary about how things used to be better planned when Dad was alive. I unbuckled too early, grabbing for my bag in the trunk space behind the last row. I was tired of waiting for someone to notice I existed. I figured I'd just move. The moment I stepped down, my foot caught uneven gravel. Pain shot up my leg like a fire line, and my body gave out before I could say a word. I dropped fast, hard, landing on my hip and elbow, and none of them even turned around when I fell. The gravel bit into my knees as I tried to stand. My left leg could take weight, but the right, something wasn't right. My ankle felt like it had come unhinged from the rest of me, like it was floating and throbbing all at once. I gritted my teeth and pushed myself upright, trying to mask the sound that almost came out of me. No one turned around. Not Marlo. Not Velda. Not even Haley, who was closest. I limped toward them, dragging my bag behind me, like it weighed more than I did. Velda glanced back once. "Come on, we're late for check-in," she said, as if I'd been dilly-dallying at the gift shop. Marlo didn't even pause his steps. He was already halfway to the lodge, arguing with the GPS on his phone. Inside, the air conditioning was set way too high for how cold my body already felt. The woman at the front desk smiled and handed over 3 room keys. Velda turned to me and said, "We're all in one unit. You can take the sofa bed." Then she tossed a key at me like she was feeding a dog. I nodded. "Because what else do you do?" Later that morning, we walked out toward the trail for the first tour. The park ranger talked about keeping hydrated and staying on marked paths. I was still limping, but quietly. Every step sent a ripple of pain up my shin, but I told myself to breathe through it. I wasn't going to give them any reason to say I was being dramatic. The canyon was massive. Terracotta cliffs and sharp ledges that made the wind whistle louder than usual. I pulled out my phone, tried to snap a photo near the edge, just to have something that wasn't ugly from this trip. And that's when Marlo walked by and gave me a nudge. "Don't fall," he said, laughing. But I did. My foot twisted beneath me, and the next thing I knew, I was on the ground again, this time harder. My phone flew, my sunglasses cracked, my hands scraped against rock. I cried out, instinct, not intention. But it didn't matter. Velda's voice rang out from above me. "Get up, people are watching." I blinked through the pain, my vision spotty. I looked down at my ankle, which was now starting to swell. Purple blooming under the skin, like a bruise that already knew it was permanent. "I can't walk," I muttered. I looked up at Marlo. "I really think I sprained it." He rolled his eyes. "You always say that when you want to sit something out." Velda walked over, hands on hips. "You're making a scene. Can you just breathe through it?" Haley leaned in and whispered, "Try not to cry. Grandma gets annoyed." And so I stood up, on that broken ankle, for them. The trail was long, more than 2 miles round trip, mostly in direct sun, and the ranger wasn't one for stopping often. Every bump in the path, every slope, felt like it was aimed directly at the nerves in my leg. I bit down so hard on my lip that I tasted metal. No one offered me water. Marlo got 2 bottles handed to him. "He looks flushed," Velda said. I limped behind the group like a stray dog they hadn't meant to bring. At one point, I thought about sitting down and refusing to move. But then I imagined Velda's face. Bored, disappointed, maybe even smug. "Told you she'd flake," she'd say. So I kept going. 3 hours. That's how long it lasted. By the time we circled back toward the parking lot, my shirt was stuck to my back, and my ankle had swollen past the top of my sock. I didn't speak. I didn't trust what would come out. We reached a bench. I collapsed onto it, letting my bag drop. Marlo sat a few feet away, scrolling through photos. Velda walked over, unwrapped a sandwich, and handed it to me. "Eat something," she said. "Maybe that'll stop the dramatics." I looked at the food, then at her. My lips parted, but I couldn't form words. Not because I didn't have them, because I had too many. And I realized they weren't going to help me. Not now. Not later. Not ever. As I tried to stand again, the weight sent a sharp crack through my knee. I caught myself before hitting the ground. No one noticed. No one looked. The bench felt like concrete beneath me, but it was the closest thing to relief I'd had all day. My ankle was screaming, my head throbbing, and I could feel sweat drying into a sticky film across my back. When I tried to stand, my leg buckled again, and still, not one of them flinched. Eventually, they wandered toward the parking lot, chatting about dinner plans. Marlo tossed the keycard at me like a frisbee. It landed in the dirt next to my bag. "We're heading out to that winery tour. Just rest if you need to. Don't make it a thing." Velda chimed in without stopping. "No room service. It's expensive." Then they were gone. I limped behind them to the hotel room, struggling to balance my weight on the opposite leg. No one offered to carry my bag, ask if I needed ice, or even say goodbye. That was the last time I saw any of them for 11 hours. Inside the room, I collapsed onto the edge of the pull-out couch. I didn't bother unfolding it. I peeled off my sock, slowly, carefully, bracing myself for what I already knew. The moment the fabric passed over my ankle, the pain sharpened into something mean. My skin was tight and purple, puffed up around the joint. There wasn't any ice in the room. No painkillers. I didn't have anything except 2 stale granola bars from my backpack and a half-empty water bottle. I texted Velda, "I think this might be serious." It showed, "Read." Nothing came back. I sat for a while, letting the silence fill every corner. The kind of silence that doesn't just mean alone, but forgotten. I thought about calling my mom. Not because I believed she'd help, but because some part of me wanted to give her one last chance to prove me wrong. She answered after the 3rd ring. Her voice was loud, like she was at a restaurant. "What now?" I tried to keep my tone level. "My ankle's really swollen. I think I need to see someone, maybe the hospital." She sighed like I just told her steak was overcooked. I swear, every time we try to have a good trip. Then, sharper. "Rest it off, don't make this bigger than it is." And then, click. That click hit louder than any shout ever could. Because it wasn't just the end of a call, it was the confirmation that she still saw my pain as a nuisance, not a concern. I tried Marlo next. He answered. I could hear people laughing behind him. "You're okay, Lark. You just need to stop spiraling." "I'm not spiraling. I'm in pain. It's turning colors." "You cried when Dad changed the Wi-Fi password," he said, like that was proof of something. "You have a history." Then he hung up too. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I didn't break anything. Instead, I plugged in my phone, opened the Notes app, and started writing. Not for them. For me. March 12th, 4:47 p.m. Pain level 810. Swelling present. No support offered. Keycard thrown. Text ignored. Call dismissed. No attempt to assess injury. No medication provided. Left unsupervised. I started a new entry every few hours, documenting everything. When I ate, when I tried to stand, when the throbbing shifted. I took pictures. Angles, timestamps, close-ups. I wasn't sure who I was gathering it for yet, but I knew why. If no one else was going to believe me, I'd build a story they couldn't deny. I sat there for hours. The light in the room shifted from gold to gray. Outside, I could hear other families laughing. Someone knocked at the door down the hall, a voice calling, "Dinner's here," in that cheerful, easy way people have when they're not busy being erased. I opened the camera app, turned it on myself. My face was pale, lips pressed tight. I flipped the camera to my foot, red, swollen, a visual that said more than I ever could with words. I hit record. This is just in case they say it wasn't that bad. After I hit record, I set the phone down on the nightstand. The room was still, the kind of still that doesn't come from peace, but from being completely forgotten. The air conditioner kicked on again. Cold air blew across the back of my neck, and for a second, I felt numb enough to rest. I didn't. Instead, I sat cross-legged on the bed, holding a plastic bag of hotel ice I managed to convince the front desk clerk to give me after I told him I'd twisted something while hiking. I didn't get into details. He didn't ask. He just said, "Rough day?" and handed me the bag with a kind look. That was more compassion than I'd gotten all week. The ice numbed the surface of the skin, but couldn't touch the ache underneath. I rewatched the video I'd just recorded. My voice surprised me. Calm, flat, deliberate, like a teacher taking attendance. No panic, no drama, just evidence, something they couldn't twist later. Then my phone buzzed. A message request. I almost ignored it, probably spam. But then I saw the name. Sloane Bixby. She wasn't someone I'd call a friend. We went to the same high school, had the same homeroom sophomore year. That was it. But she was the kind of girl who saw everything even when she never said much. Her message read, "I saw your name in a comment on Marlowe's post. Just wanted to say, you were always treated like crap by your family. We all saw it. I'm sorry." I stared at it longer than I should have. Not because it hurt, but because it didn't. It was strange how something could sting and soothe at the same time. This wasn't sympathy, it was confirmation. Someone else had noticed. Someone else remembered the way Velda used to show up to parent-teacher conferences, acting like she ran the school. The way Marlowe would mock me in front of the class, and the teachers would laugh along because, well, siblings tease. And the way I always ended up sitting alone during group projects. I'd spent most of my life thinking I was overreacting. Or worse, making it up. I opened a new note on my phone and titled it, "They Always Knew." Underneath, I began listing moments. Tiny ones, but real. Mr. Carlson pausing when I limped into English class with no excuse note. Our neighbor, Mrs. Fields, offering to walk me home when I was 12, and Velda practically slamming the door in her face. The camp counselor, who asked if I was feeling safe at home after I refused to swim with the group. None of them had done anything, but they had seen something. Maybe they thought someone else would step in. Maybe they didn't know what to say. But they knew. I scrolled back up to Sloane's message and typed a reply. "Thank you." That's all I said, and it was enough. After that, I leaned back into the pillows and let my brain wander where it hadn't dared to go in years. I remembered 8th grade, field day. It was hot, and I hadn't eaten breakfast. I passed out during the tug of war. When I came to, the nurse told me my mom had said I was just dramatic, and that I'd probably faked it to get out of the race. That's what she told the principal, too, and I believed her. That day, and so many others like it, I believed that my body was a liar, that my pain was suspect, that being tired or dizzy or scared meant I was trying to manipulate someone. The truth is, I wasn't fragile. I was trained to doubt my own signals. It hit me all at once. The worst part wasn't that they neglected me. It was that they made me question whether I even deserved better. That night, lying there with the hum of the mini-fridge in the corner and the glow of the bedside lamp, I realized something. I wasn't angry anymore. Not in the way I used to be. The kind of anger that makes you want to prove your worth. That's the kind that keeps you tied to them, hoping if you shout loud enough, someone will finally hear. But what I felt now was sharper, cleaner. I didn't want them to understand me anymore. I just wanted them to lose the privilege of defining me. I opened the Notes app again and added one more line under "They Always Knew." Me. Now. Then I opened the camera one more time. I held the phone at arm's length. My face was tired. Not broken, just done pretending. I hit record and looked directly at the lens. This is for future me, just in case you ever start to wonder again if it was your fault. Morning came slowly, like it was dragging itself across the floor just to find me. I woke to the pressure in my foot, dull and constant, like a warning that never shut up. I sat up, blinked toward the heavy curtains, and waited to see if anyone had texted. Nothing. I checked again. Still nothing. I sent Velda one more message. I think I need to see a doctor. My foot looks worse. It showed red almost instantly. But that was it. No reply, no call. Just her signature silence, sharp and polished. I called Marlo. It rang 3 times before it cut to voicemail. I didn't bother trying Haley. She'd pretend she didn't see it or blame the bad Wi-Fi. Either way, it would end in silence. They'd gone out again. Winery tour? Something about natural springs. I remembered Velda mentioning it as she was packing sunscreen the day before. And here I was, ankle swollen, alone in a rental suite I wasn't even supposed to be part of. I was starting to think the whole trip was designed around forgetting I existed. I got up, slowly, and hobbled over to the desk to call the front desk downstairs. I asked if there was a local urgent care or walk-in clinic. The woman on the phone was kind, efficient. There's a clinic about 2 miles out. Do you have insurance on file with us? I think so, I said, but I already felt the panic creeping in. I opened my folder from the suitcase. Velda had printed everything and handed it to me in a plastic sleeve back home. We'll handle everything, she'd said. Just pack and show up. I flipped through the documents, eyes skimming lines I'd seen before. Lodging confirmation, tour schedule, group insurance. Covered travelers, Velda Boone, Marlo Vex, Haley Vex, Ben Vex. No Lark DeVoe. Not even a misspelling. Not even a note. Just absence. I thanked the woman at the front desk and hung up before I could say anything stupid, like cry, or explain, or beg. Back in the room, I dropped the folder on the bed and stared at it. I didn't have the energy to pace, so I just leaned against the wall and tried to process what I was looking at. This wasn't a slip. This wasn't forgetfulness. This was exclusion dressed up as planning. They'd booked me into rooms, added me to dinners, asked me to pitch in for tickets. But when it came to medical coverage, when it came to protecting me if something actually went wrong, I wasn't part of the package, not even on paper. And that hurt in a way I didn't have a word for. Because forgetting someone is one thing, but pretending they were never supposed to be there at all, that's something else entirely. I thought back to 2 days ago. I'd slipped $20 into Haley's bag before the flight, told her it was for snacks, because I knew Velda wouldn't think to pack anything for the kids. And I remember thinking, this is what family does. But now it felt like I'd been running on a definition that nobody else agreed to. Maybe family wasn't shared blood, or holidays, or group photos. Maybe it was something people opt into, and maybe mine had opted out a long time ago. I pulled out the crutches the front desk had offered me the day before. They were too short, wobbly, clearly meant for emergencies, but I used them anyway, moving slowly around the room while I opened the Notes app on my phone. Under the folder they always knew, I started a new entry. They never planned to. I typed, "Today I found proof that I was never protected. Not as a daughter, not as a traveler, not as anything." It wasn't a mistake. It was a map they drew without me on it. I stood there, staring at the screen, the blue cursor blinking like it was waiting for permission. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I didn't text Velda again. Instead, I opened a browser and typed, "How to report medical neglect across state lines." I started reading. Protocols, phone numbers, form titles. Some were easy, some were complicated. But they were there. And for the first time, I didn't feel small. I felt prepared. Just as I was about to click Submit on a form that asked me to describe the situation, a new email popped up on the top of my screen. Subject line, "Request to verify dependent status for student travel insurance coverage. Haley Vex." I froze, because that's when I realized whose name they'd used, and it wasn't mine. I stared at the subject line for a long time before I opened the email. My thumb hovered, my breathing shallow, not out of panic, but of clarity. They'd used Haley's name, not mine. When it came time to assign coverage, define who mattered, check the boxes that legally said, this person is one of us, they picked someone else. I was just there to fill the space in the photos. I didn't finish the form. I closed the browser, pushed the laptop aside, and grabbed my phone. This time, I didn't document for them. I didn't cry into the lens, hoping someone would come save me. I sat at the desk, straight-backed, facing the window with light cutting through the blinds like a courtroom spotlight. I opened the voice memo I'd recorded the night before and listened to it once. I sounded scared, careful, like I was asking permission to be hurt. That version of me had done what she could. Now, I started a new recording. This is Lark DeVoe. I am 32 years old. I was left alone in a hotel out of state by my family after sustaining what I now know is a fractured tibia. No one checked on me. No one offered help. They walked out, knowing I was limping, and never returned. My voice didn't shake. My condition has worsened. I am recording this in case my pain is once again dismissed or reframed as exaggeration. I saved it, exported it, and sent a copy to a private Google Drive folder labeled Truth, No Edits. Then I did what any sensible adult would do when no one is coming. I got myself to urgent care. No theatrics, no audience. I wrapped my ankle with a clean towel and held it in place using a strip of duct tape I found in the hotel's utility drawer. My step was uneven, but steady enough to reach the curb. I opened my ride app and requested the next available driver. ETA, 7 minutes. When the car pulled up, the driver rolled down the window and gave me a long look. You okay getting in? I nodded. I'll manage. She didn't ask anything else until we were halfway there. You know, she said gently, I've driven folks to clinics for everything from sunburn to bullet wounds. You're the first person I've seen limping on a foot like that without someone next to you. I glanced at her. Late 40s, gray sweater, clean dashboard. Her name tag said Clarissa, no wedding ring. Her tone wasn't judgment, it was understanding. I didn't have a choice, I said. She tapped the turn signal. Maybe not, but I've learned. When people show you where you stand, believe them. We didn't speak for the rest of the ride. But when she parked, she looked at me again and said, You know you didn't do anything wrong, right? I gave a small nod. That moment stayed with me longer than the X-ray. Inside the clinic, the front desk asked the routine questions. Name, date of birth, emergency contact. None, I said. They looked up. Are your parents or guardians with you? No, I said. I came alone. The receptionist's expression shifted. Just slightly, but enough to signal something registered. A nurse came out to get me before I'd even finished filling the form. In the exam room, I was told to wait. A few minutes later, they wheeled in a portable X-ray machine and positioned my foot carefully. I winced, but I didn't scream. They took 3 images, then stepped out. When the doctor returned, he didn't ask if it hurt. He just showed me the scan. Fractured tibia. Not displaced, but close. Moderate swelling. They'd caught it before it worsened, but he looked at me over the chart like he wanted to ask how I'd even made it this far without treatment. Instead, he said, This should have been seen yesterday. You're lucky it didn't shift. That word, lucky, landed funny. I nodded anyway. They gave me a boot brace, a prescription for anti-inflammatories, and instructions to elevate and ice. As I filled out the exit paperwork, I overheard voices at the front desk. Low tones, a phone call. One of the nurses said, Yes, she's alone, minor. Injury untreated for over 24 hours. I didn't need to ask what that meant. I knew. Mandatory reporting. Turns out you don't need to yell. You just need the right system to whisper on your behalf. I left the clinic limping, prescription bag in one hand, and my pride tucked tight under the other arm. The air smelled cleaner than the hotel, like dust and pine and something fresh. Then my phone buzzed. A voicemail. Velda. I didn't answer. but I listened. Her voice was clipped, professional almost. Don't do something you'll regret just to make a point. And that's when it hit me. They thought I was bluffing. The message ended, and I slipped the phone back into my pocket without replying. I didn't need to respond. Not yet. I already knew what would be waiting for me on the other side of that voicemail. A mix of guilt-wrapped threats and gentle manipulation disguised as motherly concern. So I didn't rush back to the hotel. I sat down on the bench outside the clinic instead. Just me, a plastic bag of medication, a wrapped foot, and air that finally felt like it didn't belong to someone else's rules. I stared out at the sidewalk, watched the shadows of a row of aspens ripple over the concrete, and let my mind go quiet. No plans, no arguments, no responses. Just stillness. I opened my ride app out of habit, hovered over the Request Ride button, then hit cancel. I wasn't ready to return to four walls that reminded me more of a waiting room than a sanctuary. Sometimes you just want the world to slow down, just enough for your breath to catch up to your body. A few minutes passed before I opened the app again and requested a ride. 5 minutes out. Driver, Clarissa. When the car pulled up, it was her. Same calm eyes, same clean car. This time, she didn't speak when I got in. She helped me load the crutches into the trunk, gave me a look that said, "I remember you," and we pulled off in silence. The kind of silence that doesn't press or punish. Halfway back to the hotel, Clarissa finally broke it. "They let you walk on that?" Her voice was low but not cold. I nodded. Not out of agreement, just acknowledgement. She clicked her tongue, not judging, just processing. Someone should be held accountable. I looked out the window. "They're family!" Clarissa didn't miss a beat. "That's not the same thing as safe." I felt that. Deep. Like a key clicking in a lock I didn't know was jammed. We rode the rest of the way in a kind of knowing quiet. Before I got out, she turned slightly and reached into her glove box. She handed me a small laminated card with a name, number, and the words, Family Survivor Network. "They help people like you," she said. "You don't have to be alone just because they left you." That card felt heavier than it should have. Back in the hotel room, the air was stale. The curtains hadn't moved. The thermostat blinked a tired 72 degrees. But something had shifted in me. I didn't sit down. I didn't collapse. I stood, one crutch under my arm, and opened my phone. Went straight to the folder I'd been building. Not evidence anymore. I changed the name to testimony. And beneath it, I added a new line. First person who believed me, Clarissa. Not family, not blood, but real. I breathed. Then I opened the email app and composed a new message to the organization on the card. I didn't make it long. I didn't explain every detail, just enough. Subject, I need to tell the truth, and I want it to count. Message, my name is Lark DeVoe. I was left behind by family while injured in a different state. I'm no longer interested in hoping they'll do the right thing. I'm interested in doing something right for myself. Can someone speak to me about what happens next? I hit send. Not with anger. With clarity. A knock came at the door not long after. I limped over slowly, opened it with care. The hotel manager stood there, shifting politely on his feet. "There's someone downstairs asking about you," he said. "A woman named Velda." Of course. I thanked him, closed the door, and didn't move for a full minute. Because I knew. She wasn't here to check on my leg. The knock had barely faded when I stepped away from the door, my body bracing on instinct like it always had around her. I gave myself 20 seconds, just enough time to square my shoulders and remember who I was now. Then I unlocked the door. The hotel manager stood aside with the same awkward kindness he'd shown when I first checked in. Behind him, Velda appeared like she was walking into a boardroom. Not a hospital, not a hotel, a room she thought she still owned. "You didn't answer your phone," she said, like that explained the last week of silence between us. She didn't look at my leg. She didn't ask if I was in pain. She didn't even sit down gently, just lowered herself into the chair near the dresser like it was her right. I didn't speak first. I didn't offer water. I waited. "We need to talk," she said, crossing one leg over the other. "Before you do something, you can't walk back." I almost laughed. Couldn't walk back? She had no idea how fitting that was. I sat on the edge of the bed, facing her fully. She didn't like that. She preferred when I kept one foot out of the room, like I was always ready to leave and apologize. "Marlowe's job is at risk," she said flatly. "He said you're threatening legal action. Is that true?" I shrugged. Not because I didn't know the answer, but because it was the only gesture I could offer without adding heat to the room. Her face tightened. "Look, Lark, I know this hasn't been perfect, but you've always been a little sensitive. That's not an insult, it's just, you take things hard." "You mean seriously," I corrected. She tilted her head. "This family's been through a lot. It doesn't help when someone adds fuel." "Funny," I said, "how the people who ignore your voice are always the first to panic when you finally use it." There was no shouting, no tears, just a pause long enough for her to know this version of me wasn't folding. I reached for my phone, opened the file folder I'd curated for days, and tapped "Send" on the email I'd already addressed to her, just waiting in drafts. I watched her phone buzz in her purse. "What's that?" she asked. "Everything." She opened the notification with the same caution you give a letter from the IRS. As her finger scrolled, I saw her jaw lock. In that folder, photos of my ankle, before and after, screenshots of texts ignored, audio clips of my calls to Marlo and Velda, a copy of the group itinerary, insurance list with my name omitted. The video. In case they call me dramatic. Velda's face didn't contort the way I expected. No outrage, just calculation. That scared me more than yelling would have. "This isn't necessary," she said, voice low. "No, it's overdue." She set the phone down, folded her hands. "You could have come to me. We could have talked." "I did," I said, steady. "You called me a problem. Now I'm documenting one." She stood. The chair creaked as it scraped back across the laminate floor. She walked toward the window, touched the curtain like she was adjusting something, then turned around. "What are you trying to prove?" I stared at her, long enough to make her uncomfortable. "I'm not trying to prove anything. I'm just tired of being erased." She didn't respond right away. Her fingers fidgeted with the strap of her purse, then gripped it like a lifeline. "You'll regret this," she muttered, like she'd said it before to someone who had. I didn't flinch. "No, but you might." She paused at the door, one hand still on the knob. Her lips parted, like she was going to try one last guilt tactic, but then she shut them again and walked out. As the door clicked behind her, I sat in the silence, breathing like it was the first real breath in weeks. Sometimes people tell you not to burn bridges, but what they don't say is that some bridges were already ash. You just finally lit the match they were pretending didn't exist. After Velda left, the room felt different. Not lighter, but stripped bare. Like the pretense had finally packed its bags and left with her. I didn't bother turning on the TV. I just sat at the edge of the bed, my foot elevated, the brace wrapped tight, and stared at the unread message count on my phone. 3, then 4. The 5th was from Marlo. I opened it, not because I expected anything new, but because part of me wanted to see how quickly they'd pivot from control to guilt. No greeting, no punctuation, just, "You're really doing this? You're going to ruin all of us over your personal drama?" And then another line. "You need to stop this before it gets out of hand." I didn't react, not immediately. I took a screenshot and saved it to the folder. Label, Threat Number 1, Emotional Manipulation, because that's what it was. A statement meant to intimidate, cloaked in family language. I thought back to the first time he'd used that tone. I was 14. We were playing baseball in the backyard, just the cousins and a few neighbors. I wasn't athletic, never had been. But I tried. Marlo had swung too wide and hit me in the ribs. I crumpled, gasping for air, tears already springing to my eyes. He'd looked down at me and said, "Don't ruin the fun again." Later, Velda told me I was too dramatic, too sensitive. "You're fine," she said. "You always make things bigger than they are." They never had to lie. They just made sure the version of me they told the world was easier to dismiss. I stared at Marlo's message again, fingers hovering over the reply button. I typed something, then deleted it. Then started again. But I didn't send it. Instead, I opened the email Clarissa's contact at the legal clinic had provided and drafted a note. Subject: ongoing intimidation from relatives involved in neglect case. Body: attached is a message sent by a family member involved in the incident currently under review. I am documenting this for the record, as it aligns with a long-standing pattern of emotional control and verbal dismissal following acts of neglect. Please advise if this should be submitted to CPS or your office directly. I hit send without rereading it. Later that night, I opened a blank document on my laptop and began outlining everything in formal detail. The tour itinerary, the fall, the 3-hour walk, the way no one checked on me, the messages I'd sent that went unanswered, the fact that I'd been left alone in another state with a visible injury. I wrote for over an hour. No breaks, just truth. I ended the statement with one line. I no longer believe my family has my best interest at heart. Typing that didn't feel like betrayal. It felt like finally pulling off the mask I'd been forced to wear since I was old enough to understand that being loved and being tolerated weren't the same thing. Around 10, Haley texted, "Mom says you're going to get Uncle Marlo fired." That was all. No, "How are you?" No, "What happened?" Just a warning, like I was causing damage, and she was the messenger. I didn't respond. Instead, I copied the message, pasted it into a new section of my file, and titled it Collateral Responses. They thought I was burning down the house out of spite, but what they didn't see was that I'd already been standing in the ashes. All I did was point to the smoke. I opened the shared folder I'd created earlier and uploaded the full case file, labeled, dated, and backed up. Then, I attached it to an email addressed to the school district's HR director. Subject: professional conduct, urgent, no body text, just the file. I watched the green progress bar crawl across the screen. Upload complete. Sent to school district HR mailbox. No drama, no confession, no crying, just a quiet final click. Because if they wanted quiet, they should have listened when I whispered. Morning came quiet. Not peaceful, just quiet. The kind of quiet that follows after something loud has shifted in the room, even if no one was there to hear it. I brewed coffee in the hotel room, mostly for the smell. My stomach didn't want anything, but the smell made things feel normal, adult, functional. Then my inbox pinged. Subject line: RE, professional conduct, urgent. I clicked before I could overthink. The reply was brief. We've received your file. A review has begun. The attached footage is under formal review and has been logged with district council. That was it. I opened the video one last time. Not because I needed to, but because I wanted to watch it without flinching. Marlo's hand pushed my shoulder, my body pitched forward, and I slipped out of frame. No edits, no commentary, just truth in motion. It didn't need a caption. It didn't need an explanation. It didn't even need my name on it. It only needed daylight. I closed the file. Then the voicemail icon blinked. Velda. I put in my earbuds and hit play. Her voice was clipped, professional, like she was practicing damage control. "I hope you're happy," she began. "You've embarrassed us all. Marlo could lose his job over this nonsense. You've made a private family matter into a public circus." I paused it right there. That was all I needed. I saved the audio, labeled it, "Discredit us, protect." In my digital notes, I wrote a new line. No concern about the injury, only the exposure. My phone buzzed again. This time, a message from Haley. No greeting, just 4 screenshots. A forwarded thread from the family group chat, the one I hadn't been invited to. She's always been unhinged. We should have left her out completely. She'll crawl back eventually. Let her enjoy her little rebellion. I didn't cry. I didn't delete. I didn't argue. I forwarded the screenshots to the legal rep handling my case with the school district. No extra message, just data. Then I opened the anonymous reporting portal for the school and started typing. This isn't revenge, I wrote. This is accountability. One should never come at the cost of silence. I attached the footage, the voicemail, the screenshots. I included date stamps, names, locations, every detail, neatly organized, labeled, cross-referenced. I'd learned that truth doesn't need to raise its voice to be heard. It just needs to be filed where the right eyes will read it. Once I submitted, I leaned back in the desk chair and stared at the wall. My foot throbbed. The pressure cuff around my ankle pulsed in sync with my heartbeat. I thought of all the ways I'd tried to tell the truth before. Softly, carefully, with disclaimers. I used words like, I could be wrong, or I might be overreacting. And each time, they nodded and dismissed it, like patting a dog on the head for barking at the wrong mailman. But this time, I hadn't asked for permission. And that was the difference. Later, I updated my private log. I kept it like a case file now, one I would have drafted for a client back when I still believed in building things by the book. I logged 6:42 a.m. Email confirmation of receipt from HR, 6:58 a.m. Voicemail from Velda, archived, 7:11 a.m. Haley's screenshots, submitted, 7:26 a.m. Formal submission to reporting portal by 8:15 a.m. My inbox pinged again. Subject: Administrative leave notification, Marlo Vex. The email was short and surgical. Mr. Vex has been placed on immediate administrative leave pending internal review. He has been notified not to return to campus or communicate with students or staff until further notice. I sat there for another minute, just staring at the screen. Not in shock. Not with glee. With confirmation. Not once, through all of it, had anyone asked if I was okay. By early afternoon, the hallway outside my room buzzed with the sound of vacuums and doors clicking shut. I'd just closed my laptop when the hotel phone rang. I let it go. 2 minutes later, my cell buzzed with a call from the front desk. A soft voice said, "There's a call for you here, ma'am. From someone named Henny?" I already knew. I thanked her, slipped on my brace, and walked slowly down to the lobby. The phone at the counter was warm when I picked it up. Aunt Henny's voice came through the line with forced sweetness, like maple syrup poured over cold toast. "Sweetheart," she said, "I just heard from your mom. She's very upset." I didn't answer. "You've created quite a storm," she continued. "I told her I'd call. It's not too late to fix this." My grip on the receiver didn't tighten, but the silence on my end was enough. She shifted her tone, just slightly. "Your uncle has a family to support. Do you really want to go that far? This can still stay within the family. We don't have to drag it into courtrooms or, God forbid, social media." There it was. The warning, wrapped in concern. The performance of peacekeeping. "You shouldn't have sent that file, Lark. You'll regret it when things spiral. People forget. Files don't." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't lean in. "That's the point." She tried to soften again. "You know your mother. She doesn't always say the right thing, but her heart's in the right place." That was the kind of lie families told themselves when they couldn't explain away the harm. So they repackaged it as love. "They're not asking me to forgive," I said, mostly to myself. "They're asking me not to remember in public." Henny didn't reply. I hung up the phone, nodded to the front desk, and walked back upstairs. Each step up the carpeted stairwell felt heavier than the last, but not because of the brace. It was the weight of history, of stories rewritten by the people who got to tell them first. Inside my room, I opened the laptop again and logged the call. Title: Family using intermediaries to apply pressure. Entry: Call received via front desk, approx. 12:45 p.m. Henny Lang. Language included emotional redirection, implication of financial consequence to Marlowe, and statements discouraging public reporting. Tone. Conciliatory masking coercion. A few minutes later, another voicemail came in. Velda. This time, her voice was almost calm, so much worse than angry. You should have kept this between us. Now I don't know how to protect you. I didn't archive that one. I didn't even finish it. I deleted it without saving. She never tried to protect me. Only the version of me she told people about. The one who gets emotional under pressure. The one who likes attention. The one who, somehow, always misremembers. Later that evening, I was eating from a paper container of soup when a new email arrived from the school's legal department. The subject line read, "Statement requested." I clicked it open, hands steady. The message was brief. We are beginning the formal review process. Please confirm your willingness to appear in a hearing and provide your verbal statement. Your presence will help clarify events from your first-hand perspective. You are not required to attend, but your involvement is encouraged. Final date and time to be confirmed. I read the last line again. Please confirm your willingness to appear in a formal review hearing. My thumb hovered over the reply button. I didn't need to think about it. It wasn't about what they'd done anymore. It was about what I was willing to stand for. After replying to the legal department, I closed my laptop and pushed it away like it might bite. There was nothing else to send, no more edits to make. I had done my part, and now the waiting began. Outside the window, the sky had shifted to that slow, golden hour before sunset, when everything looks softer, even what isn't. I leaned back into the chair and told myself to breathe. Just once, just deep enough to feel it. Then my inbox pinged again. Subject: Saw your story. I think this is yours. I almost skipped it, assuming it was spam, but the sender's name stopped me. Emery Glass. Not a name I knew, but the message was short. I was at the palace site that day. I saw what happened. I had my phone out filming the architecture, and I caught something. I think it's you. I hope it helps. There was a video file attached. I clicked it. The clip was maybe 10 seconds long, but it did more in 10 seconds than all my words had managed in 10 years. It showed me, standing near the steps, adjusting my camera, smiling the way you smile when someone asks you to pose, and you don't want to seem difficult. Marlowe appeared from behind, grinning like a boy about to pull a prank. He shoved me, not hard, not violent, but enough. I stumbled forward, my arms flailed, and I disappeared from frame. No one ran to help, no one screamed. In the background, Velda turned her head away. Haley laughed. They didn't think it was serious. They didn't even think it mattered. But someone else had seen it. Someone else had recorded it. And now it was real. I stared at the screen until the video looped. Then I played it again. And again. It didn't make me feel vindicated. It made me feel hollow. Like I'd been given a picture of my own bones, clear and undeniable, but deeply unsettling. It's a weird kind of grief, I whispered, watching someone else prove your pain. I didn't send an email reply. I just forwarded the clip straight to the school district, attached it to my ongoing report folder. No commentary, no explanation. The video spoke louder than I ever could. Then I turned off my phone. Not out of exhaustion, but intention. At the hotel desk, I opened my notebook and wrote a single line. This clip came from a stranger. Because strangers see what family refuses to acknowledge. I drew 2 columns on the page. At the top of one I wrote, "Saw it and denied it." At the top of the other, "Didn't see it but believed me anyway." Under the first, I listed names. Velda, Marlowe, Haley, Aunt Henny. Under the second, only one name stood, Clarissa. The next morning, I reopened my inbox. A new message from the legal team. We've reviewed the new footage. Mr. Vex's conduct appears to meet criteria for student endangerment. Legal review underway. Confirmation of your in-person statement is still requested. I didn't hesitate. I typed back, "Yes, I'll speak." Then I opened the video one last time, not for evidence, for closure. I watched myself fall again. Then I whispered, "You caught me, Emery," when they wouldn't. It wasn't justice yet, but it was a beginning. The ride to the hospital was short. I'd arranged it myself, a quiet service car with a driver who didn't talk unless I did. I liked that. No forced small talk, no awkward glances at my wrapped ankle, just silence that respected my space. When I checked in at the front desk, the clerk smiled, asked if I had an appointment. I gave her my name. Before I could finish spelling it, she interrupted politely. "Your mother is already here, asking for a status update. Would you like us to keep her updated or—" I didn't need time to answer. "You can tell her I'm capable of speaking for myself." The woman nodded, typed something into her screen, and didn't ask again. 10 minutes later, Velda walked in like she had the right to be there. Like none of the things I'd documented, recorded, or endured had changed a thing. Her posture said authority. Her face said damage control. She didn't ask about my leg. She didn't glance at the boot or the crutches leaning against the chair beside me. Instead, she sat down across from me and opened with, "I just came to ask one thing. Who else knows?" Not how I was. Not if I needed anything. Just, who else knows? I didn't speak. I didn't need to. The pause alone did most of the talking. "You've made us look like monsters," she continued. "And now the school district is involved." Her voice was calm but clipped, like a teacher scolding a student in front of a class. Like she was hoping if she stayed even enough, she could control the story. I tilted my head slightly, studying her. The woman who once told me to toughen up when I got hives at summer camp. Who said real pain doesn't announce itself after my first panic attack at 13. And now, here she was, more concerned with the fallout than the fracture. "You're not monsters," I said, my voice steady. "Monsters usually believe what they're doing is wrong. You just believe it never happened." She blinked. "Once." Sharp. "I never said you weren't hurt." "You never said I was either." She opened her mouth again, but I beat her to it. I pulled out my phone, scrolled to the official case number assigned by the school district, and showed her the screen. "This is real now, not just family drama, not just a misunderstanding." She stared at the screen like it betrayed her, like it was a living thing, baring its teeth. "You asked the wrong question," I said. "You should have asked if I'm okay." The tension in the room was thick. Her fingers twisted the strap of her purse like it was the only thing anchoring her to the floor. Before she could answer, a hospital administrator entered the waiting room. "Ms. DeVoe, we're ready for your intake. Would you like privacy?" I stood, slow but firm. Yes, I would. Velda rose as well, clearly trying to regain composure. "We can talk about this later," she said. I didn't even look at her. "No, we won't." She didn't push back. She didn't argue. She just followed me with her eyes as I turned and followed the staff member down the hall. For years, I'd wanted a moment like this to feel like a victory. But it didn't. It just felt final, like a page turning itself. I didn't hate her. I didn't want revenge. I just didn't want to be rewritten anymore. Back in the consultation room, the nurse checked my vitals while someone typed quietly at a nearby desk. A social worker hovered near the door, clipboard in hand. Then the attending came in and said gently, "You're welcome to speak on record today. Just let us know when you're ready." I nodded, looked them all in the eye, and said, "I'm ready for my official statement. I want everything documented." The room where they brought me for the official intake looked more like a neutral conference space than a medical office. The walls were beige. There was a clock that ticked too loudly, and a stack of clipboards that hadn't been touched in hours. I sat at one end of the rectangular table. Across from me were two administrators, one from the hospital, one from youth services, and a third woman with a laptop open in front of her, ready to transcribe every word I said. No one asked how I was feeling. They didn't coddle. They didn't perform empathy. And strangely, I preferred it that way. What I needed now wasn't sympathy. It was a place to speak where no one was preparing a rebuttal before I finished a sentence. They asked for a timeline, so I gave them one. Starting with the moment we arrived in Utah, I walked them through each beat. The fall, the pain, the refusal to be believed, the walking tour, the hotel, the silence, the text, the Uber, the X-ray. It felt clinical, but not cold. Factual, just facts. No bending for their comfort. No softening edges that had already drawn blood. When I finished, they didn't look shocked. They just nodded, took a few notes, and typed. One of the staff members, the one with glasses and an ID badge that read Case Liaison, cleared her throat. Thank you. Based on your statement and the documents submitted previously, this qualifies for mandatory reporting. A cross-agency inquiry will begin today. CPS will be notified due to the timeline of events and your dependency status during travel. I nodded. No surprise, no panic. They slid a form across the table. Just your signature to confirm the statement and your understanding of the process. I signed, with both hands steady. This was the first time in my life my voice wasn't being weighed, doubted, or diluted. It was being filed. After the interview, I was led to a smaller consultation room. A legal advocate from the Youth Services Division met me there. She was kind, efficient, and didn't ask for my life story. She simply said, "Your report has already been escalated. You'll likely be contacted by the school district's hearing board, possibly CPS. In some cases, law enforcement may request clarification." She handed me a printout of the materials already shared. File numbers, timestamps, summaries. "This is your record, a courtesy copy for you." I stared at the folder in my lap. It felt like a small shield, one made of paperwork and signatures instead of metal. It wasn't a promise of safety, but it was a form of proof. Sometimes safety doesn't come from protection. Sometimes it comes from receipts. The moment I stepped out of the consultation room, my phone buzzed again. I had returned to the waiting room, limping only slightly now that the swelling had begun to fade under treatment. Subject: Marlo Vex, suspension notice finalized. The email was short and surgical. The school district had completed its internal review and determined that Mr. Vex's behavior was inconsistent with its standards for educator conduct. He had been placed on administrative leave and notified not to return to campus pending the outcome of the disciplinary hearing. I read the message twice. Then I deleted it. Not because it didn't matter, but because it already had. I didn't send it to Velda, or Haley, or anyone. No updates, no screenshots, no breadcrumbs. The silence this time belonged to me. Later that night, I returned to the hotel room to pack. It took less than 10 minutes. Most of my clothes were untouched, my toiletries half used. I moved slowly, not out of sadness, but intention. There wasn't anything left to say. Not to them. I left a single sticky note on the nightstand. Not a threat, not a jab, just truth. I didn't set the fire. I just refused to stay inside the house while it burned. My ride to the airport came 20 minutes early. The lobby was quiet. I didn't look around for anyone on my way out. I climbed into the car, pulled the door shut behind me, and said nothing as we pulled away. But as the hotel disappeared from view, I whispered to myself, "Now I know! Being right isn't the same as being safe, but it's a damn good start." The airport gate was quiet, except for the low shuffle of feet and the occasional crinkle of snack wrappers. I found a seat against the far wall, away from the chargers and the crowd. I wasn't tired, but my body felt like it had been holding its breath for days. I didn't text anyone. Not Haley, not Marlo, not Velda. Instead, I opened my inbox one more time, not to check for messages, but to finish something I'd been drafting for days in my head. The message that would end this story, not with revenge, but with release. I started with the subject line, "This is the last time you'll hear from me." No dramatics, no punctuation for effect, just the finality of it. Then I began to type, "You left me, On the sidewalk, in pain. You watched it happen and told me to keep walking. You called me dramatic. Then you called me dangerous when I documented it. I'm not going to make peace with that. I don't need your version of love. This is the last message I will ever send. Don't reply. That last line, I stared at it for a long time. It wasn't meant to be cold. It was meant to be clear. I signed it with my full name. Not Lark, not sweetheart, not the girl who used to send handmade birthday cards even when hers was forgotten. Just Lark DeVoe. I reread it twice, then hovered my finger over the send button. Then I pressed it. There wasn't a sound when it sent, just the soft ping of the system accepting it, as if something had been lifted off the servers and off my spine all at once. There was no applause, no weightless catharsis, but there was peace. I leaned back in the airport chair, letting the ambient noise blur around me. My foot still ached beneath the brace. My ribs twinged from the flight booking line earlier, but the pain had changed. It had definition now, like something I could work around instead of drown in. Pain doesn't vanish, I thought, but when it has a name, when it's been witnessed, it becomes something else. Something I can manage. Boarding was called a few minutes later. I gathered my things without checking my phone. I didn't need a response. I already had the only one that mattered. Silence. The kind I chose. The line moved slow. I kept to myself. When I reached my row, I tucked into the window seat, pulled my bag under the chair, and leaned into the cool plastic wall. The woman beside me smiled as she sat down, probably in her late 60s. Red scarf, sturdy hands, a voice that carried kindness. "Traveling alone?" she asked casually. I gave a small smile back. "Not exactly," I said. "I brought all my evidence with me." She laughed, not understanding, but she didn't press, and I appreciated that. As the plane taxied toward the runway, I closed my eyes. Behind them, faces flickered. Clarissa, the nurse who saw the swelling before I spoke a word, the legal advocate who didn't flinch when I said family neglect, Emery Glass, who didn't know me at all and yet handed me the truth without strings. They didn't owe me anything, and they still gave me everything. Sometimes it doesn't take a hero to save you. Sometimes it just takes 3 strangers to remind you that you're worth being seen. I felt the plane lift off, and with it, a kind of weight peeled away. Mid-flight, my phone buzzed once. No name, just a preview. "You'll regret cutting your family out. Velda." I didn't even open it. I slid the message to the left and hit delete. Then, I whispered, just to myself, so soft the engine swallowed it whole. "No. You'll regret not being worth keeping." It had been a month, 32 days to be exact. I woke up in my own bed, in my own apartment, without a knock at the door or a voicemail blinking red. No suitcase on the floor, no hotel shampoo bottles lined up like trophies of endurance. Just morning light slanting in through the blinds, and a quiet hum from the fridge in the kitchen. My ankle still ached in the mornings, the kind of pain that reminds you you're still healing but not broken. I walked slowly to the kitchen. No crutches now, no brace. Just the soft echo of my own steps. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't looking over my shoulder to explain why I moved the way I did. I poured myself a cup of coffee and opened my laptop. The inbox was empty. For once, that felt like a blessing. It turns out, peace doesn't announce itself. It doesn't text or knock or show up with flowers. It just starts arriving when you stop making space for people who never deserve to stay. Later that day, I opened Instagram out of habit. I hadn't posted anything since the trip. I wasn't avoiding it. I just had nothing to prove anymore. But what I saw made me pause. Velda had posted a photo. The whole family at a brunch table, dressed in pastels, smiling too hard. Marlo was there, arm around Haley, Aunt Henny. Even Ben, who never used to smile with teeth, beamed like he had something to sell. Caption: "Rebuilding stronger. Family is everything." No tag, no mention, no trace of me. A mutual friend had commented, "Looks like the whole crew's back together." Velda replied with a heart emoji. And I closed the app. No screenshot, no message, no reaction. I opened my documents instead. The old folder titled Case Legal. I hovered over it for a second, then renamed it Kept. Because that's what it had become. Not just a record of what happened, but of what I refused to let be erased. That afternoon, I walked 2 blocks to the bookstore cafe around the corner from my apartment. I hadn't done that in weeks. The sun hit my shoulder blades like a nudge from someone saying, "Keep going." I ordered an iced tea, sat by the window, and bought a new journal from the rack up front. One with a navy blue cover and thick, unlined pages. When I opened it, I didn't hesitate. On the first page, I wrote, "I used to explain everything. Now I name it once and let it go." A girl in her 20s sat down at the next table, typing on her laptop. She looked over and asked, "Are you a writer?" I smiled. "Not officially, but I file things that matter." She laughed. "That's probably more honest than most writers I know." We talked for a bit. Nothing deep, just books, coffee, the way strangers sometimes do when they have no reason to pretend. That night, I stood in front of the mirror in my bathroom, toothbrush in hand. My reflection stared back with the same eyes, but a different weight. Not lighter, just mine. The scar was still there above my ankle, faint now, but visible. And I didn't look away. I still limp. I just don't explain it anymore. I still hurt. But now it's mine. Not something they get to rename or reduce. There were no voicemails, no apologies, no invitations to reconcile. And if they came, I wasn't sure I'd want them. Because some endings come without applause. Just peace. And a woman walking out of the frame. Not because she fell, but because she finally chose where to go.